Anyway, so what I was saying was those god dang foreigners are coming for our gerbs. Wait, it's a computer now? He has a plan, she has a plan, and you get to pay for it regardless.
The best way to get someone motivated is to stand for something strongly, deeply, passionately.
Subscribe to Disenthrall.
Do as you're told.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very, very special show. I think this is going to be a lot of fun and a lot of controversy about a topic that is blowing up right now. Artificial image generation. With me on the show today, I have two very special guests. Christian is not a guest anymore, actually. Welcome to the show, Christian. And David Stewart, my favorite artist, thinker, philosopher, reviewer. Welcome to the show, David. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this topic a lot because it's just kind of blown up the last week.
It really has, because they just realized that their incomes are getting affected, and they are, well, let's get into it. Okay. Who wants to kind of intro the topic, and then I will read the GoFundMe thing. Like, what is the controversy happening here, David?
There's two controversies. The first one is there's AI which can generate images that, well, at least look like art. Sorry, I'm going to silence my phone. That is very impolite of me.
Don't worry about it.
They at least look like art, right? which means they could be a replacement for art, which means artists could lose work. So that's the main focus. But then there's one more interesting, I think, moral quandary, which is how the AI learns to produce the art. Meaning, is it pulling images which are copyrighted images? Is it pulling images made by other artists in order to produce its own images? And should those artists be compensated for that act? So those are the two, I guess, extremes there, or the two moral questions.
And to that, the scope that I want to add to the discussion is just technological progress in general, how it always ends up affecting jobs negatively before, promptly thereafter making society at large generally better. I want to talk about how this is a tale as old as technology, and this is just the most recent example. It also is wrapped up in intellectual property, which, as you know, if you've watched this channel, is easily shown to be, I think, an invalid form of property. It's property through violence. We'll get into that. See, a lot of people just had a little moment there at me. I appreciate it. Christian, what are your, how do you want to have this conversation go?
I guess I'm kind of the in between of the two perspectives, right? Like I know I dabble. I would say I dabble with art, right? Kind of like affectionately, but I'm a hobbyist. I'm someone who definitely has that drive for and need for an artistic expression in my life in some form. I'm always working on some side project, whether it's a novel I've been tooling away at for years or writing a piece of music. When I was in high school and in choir, I did all kinds of SATB 8-part arrangements for vocalists because it was just, something that thrilled me. But I never went all the way with it. And I feel like it put me in a very unique position to where I can see things like this and have a very, hobbyist amateur take on it, and not be like really invested in the financial side of what it is to be an artist.
And I'll just tack onto that. It's okay to be an amateur or a hobbyist. That's good. That means that you just care about doing it for its own sake and for your sake. There's nothing wrong with that. We've turned amateur into like an insult when it really shouldn't be thought of that as that way at all.
Mm. Well, and also, so Christian kind of talked about his artistic background. David, if you could just give us, I know you do so much, but if you could give us, an overview of all the cool stuff that you've done.
So I'm a musician, and I'm a writer. So my main thing now is I write books. I do occasionally still come out with music. My formal, I guess, collegiate education was in music composition. And then, at some point I decided there's no money in music, so I want to write books. Turns out there's not a lot of money in writing books either, but that's okay because it's something that I enjoy doing, and I do it not just for an income, but also because I love creating art. And I usually design most of my own covers, and I've designed some covers for other people. I do graphic art and a little bit of just regular visual art. My mom was a painter. I would consider myself very much like an amateur as far as regular drawing and painting goes. I'm certainly no professional at that. And if I need something on that level, I'm going to go look for someone who has those skills already. I love enabling other artists and authors and musicians to succeed. I have a book called Keys to Prolific Creativity, which you can listen to it for free on YouTube. So you can go listen to it, or you can buy the ebook. I think it's $2.99. It's a pretty quick read. And all it is just how to have that productive, basically how to have a productive system that allow you to complete projects and grow as an artist. Because a lot of artists, they stall out, they don't finish their book, they get afraid of releasing it. I address all of those things in the book. And so you can find that on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/DavidStewartWriter, and it's free. You can just listen to the audiobook.
I have listened to his book. I would recommend it as well. It's really good. It's got a lot of helpful information. I would recommend his YouTube channel as well. He's got lots of tutorials like talking about developing plot arcs, developing characters, all the different archetypes of characters. Really, really interesting content. I've enjoyed being subscribed to him for years now. So he plays video games too. Yeah, it's good stuff. Me, you guys know me, so I won't spend too long on it. I'm a technologist. I'm a chief technology officer. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been into technology since I was very young, very, very as young as I can remember, almost like 12, 13, 14. I was getting into computers, computing, writing code. I I absolutely have the biggest passion in my life is for technology of all kinds, and artificial intelligence is just the newest area that technology has grown into or created that has caught my fancy. I have experience creating artificial intelligence algorithms that generate models. I have experience running those models. I've experience with most, I can't say all because there's more popping up constantly, but most of the AI models out there for image generation. I've really had a focus on speech generation. So training a model on a person's voice and then using text to generate audio of that text in the person's voice, which I think is probably going to be the next thing that people freak out about if they're not already beginning to freak out about it. That
the U.S. military already has a bunch of videos with those fake voices on them.
Yeah,
and like, so you can look up. They'll be talking about some piece of military equipment, and it's got like the announcer voice, and you hear it, and you're like, "There's something slightly uncanny about that," but it sounds a little better each time they try to do it.
I have a model on my computer that will take an audio file as an input and then amp anybody you train it on. I have one trained on Morgan Freeman, and I could just spit out Morgan Freeman monologues, and it's like I would say it's 80% there. It's definitely not perfect yet,
I think James Earl Jones actually sold the rights to his voice to Disney, so they can like generate after he's dead. They can use his voice to make Darth Vader live forever.
Wow,
which is
yep.
in that kind of weird, uncanny area.
That's a very evil Disney thing that they would do.
Yeah, actually, that's something I'm sure we'll get into because a fellow author named Ron Leonzi pointed out that if these artists are able to take down, if they're able to take down these AIs, people like Disney are the ones who are going to benefit from the AIs because they're the ones who already own all the intellectual property.
And they have the resources to train the models, to the point where they'd be useful. Exactly. Yeah. So that's my technology background. My artist background is very limited compared to the other people on the screen right now. I'm a photographer. That's probably my biggest contribution in terms of art. I love photography. I've done everything from just sort of like art photography to like weddings. I've done wedding photography, things like that. Second to that, and I forgot about this until just now, is like I make these, I love 3D design. Like I make these things and I didn't really think of this as art because it
totally is.
It's just using the computer, but I guess it is, right? Like, so, hey, look at me go.
You have artistic intent. You have an idea there. It's a work performed to a standard. It's art.
Yes. And so actually I want to get into that because what you just said defines art and I don't have a definition for art. So I would like to maybe start there. What is art? What makes something art and what makes something not art? Because I think, David, you have an opinion that AI art is not art.
Yeah. So let's get into that because the 20th century was really like the art movements of the 20th century, really the academic art movements, because we have this division of like pop art and academic art. Academic art was like the postmodern question of what is art? Anything could be art. We'll tape a banana to a wall, and if we pretend it's art, then it's art. Well, another author named Brian Niemeyer, he went with this kind of, it's a pretty robust definition. And art is work performed to a standard, which means that it's really wide, right? Like, making a horseshoe could be art if you were to take that to its extreme. And I put art as like, art is not just work performed to a standard, but there's an artistic intent behind it, meaning there's an intent for an outcome, right? And that's important because in the 20th century, we got this thing called aleatoric art. And this was big in music where you just would roll dice or like you take rice and put it in ink and like throw it against staff paper and like, that's the notes. And it's like, there's no intent behind that. You didn't intend for any outcome to happen. And now I say that having done a lot of random music myself and things where I didn't know the outcome. But that's the question of whether AI art is art. It's certainly an image. It certainly can look like art, but I think it lacks a certain amount of artistic intent. And I will say, like my subscribers have pointed out, well, entering the text in is the artistic intent. And that is probably enough to qualify as artistic intent. So that would be the rebuttal to that. And I think it's a pretty good one.
Christian, do you have any thoughts on that? Like what is art? What is not art?
Oh, I could derail this whole talk with going through it because I've put, as someone who has often said like, oh, I don't do aesthetics much, I stick in my metaphysics and ethics and whatnot. But I've thought a lot about the question, what is art? Because it's something that's important to me especially after I like fully identified that like, hey, this is like a need that I have to fill in my life, is this like artistic expression. So what is that for me? And I really think of it as two ways. Two separate ideas under the same sort of umbrella that's art, and one is the creation of art and one is the engagement with art, and you can see from that perspective different things as art under different contexts, and these are not necessary and sufficient conditions. I think they're kind of like cluster concepts, or if anybody's familiar with Wittgenstein, family resemblance concepts, where there's just a lot of sufficient conditions, and if it meets enough of them, it's like if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Without any more preamble, I see the doing of art as kind of like an emotive expression that comes out through there's an art. This is going to sound so dumb when I say it, but work with me here. There's an artness to it. When you're doing it, you feel that artness, if you will. It touches you in that part of your soul where you're like expressing something, you're getting something onto the page, to the canvas, onto the keyboard, into the hammer, into whatever. And on the other end, you've externalized essentially like that quality into the material. That's something I feel, at least, and I feel a lot of other artists that I've talked to can feel the same way about a piece of art that they worked on. But then the experiencer, the person who is going to be like perceiving the art, has their own totally different, distinct interaction with the thing, where they may not see the horseshoe as the art, where the person who made it, the blacksmith, could see it as art. And that has to do with evoking some kind of emotional experience outside of the pale of ordinary reality. For the same reason, like we typically don't say like really fluffy clouds that are really nice are art. We wouldn't say, like a well-cut. We might say something though, like a well-cut lawn is an art.
Yeah, and that's kind of a work performed to a standard. The point is like the work is performed. Like a tree is not art because it just grows; it just is. Whereas you carving the tree into a shape might be art because then it is something that you've done. Like it's work. It's something that's acted upon. Now, I will point out that it's interesting that we're sitting here thinking like, what is art? Because if we were to go back in time to like some medieval person, they probably wouldn't think very much about what is art because it would be very obvious what art is. Like you'd be like, well, I went to the church and there's an icon of St. Christopher and obviously that's art. And, maybe I made a necklace and that's art. They just really, there's not that many things to compete with the idea of art. Whereas now we're like, is a photograph art? Because it's an image of a thing that exists, but there's artistic intent. We have to think, okay, a photographer framed that, intended to take that picture and capture that image for artistic reasons. That's what makes the photograph art, rather than like a CCTV, robot just scanning someone as they walk by. That's not really art, right? There's no artistic intent behind your CCTV system looking at customers as they walk through the door of your shop or something like that. I think so.
Okay, so Engineer Patrick is going to swing in and be like, it feels like we're begging the question when we say that art is something created with artistic intent, because then you're just asking, okay, well, what is artistic intent? Like, what is artistic?
Yeah, what is artistic intent? Maybe like a creative or expressive intent.
Creative or
that's
intent.
Rather
that's
than
why
like
I use
it's something going out of you, rather than something that exists on its own.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I use the I like to lean into the that which evokes experiences outside of the ordinary pale of reality, because that to me it necessarily implies that what you're coming across isn't like some just like natural phenomenon, like a really aesthetic creek bed or something. But if you came across someone who had stacked the stones in a way that, like, oh, wow, someone like put the time into doing this and it looks so great in the scene and the way that, whatever, you can like appreciate those aspects of it that you just wouldn't really appreciate of standard reality. But I don't think, I wouldn't use the word an artistic intent behind it. I think you can have kind of like non-artistic intents in some cases and get art out of it for the end user, the actual consumer.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it too. Probably have to do a little.
This
more,
is
like,
this is a this is an area which I just admit total amateurness in. I got it when I was training to be a photographer. I went to photography training schools every year, and I'm also a philosophy nerd, and so very quickly I realized that there was this question of, well, is that photo art? Like, what makes it art? What makes it good art? What makes it bad art? And everyone had a different answer, and I realized, okay, this is just a mess. And so I just ignored it, and I moved on. And I'm like, well, look, it's art when I say it is for me.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to pin down. We asked this question. I remember in graduate school, we asked, like, what is music? And like the working definition we kind of arrived at was like organized sound. And then it's like, well, what about this guy who says his music is disorganized sound? I'm like, yeah, I make like this random elements. Is that still music? It's like, well, maybe it's not. Maybe that's not music. Maybe that's the disorganized sound, even though you're acting with intent, isn't music because it's disorganized. I don't know. It's hard to pin that down when you're at the extremes of like what this means. Conversely, like the pop art side of it, these questions don't even come up because it's obvious that it's art. It's like, well, it's a painting. Of course it's art. It's a painting of a person.
When you're working with paradigmatic cases of these things, you don't ever have to think about, like, is it one? Like, of course it is. You know, it just is. Like, no one's going to look at the Mona Lisa and be like, is this art? Like, yeah, it's kind of like the paradigm of art.
It's trying to figure out, like, where's that boundary of when does it stop being art? And I think AI is like an interesting case for that too, because it's like, well, you know, it's a thing that kind of just exists on its own because the software makes it, but there is some artistic input, like you're telling it to draw with those colors and something comes out of it. So there is some amount of artistic intent in it. It certainly looks like art, right? So it has that, the what did you call it? A cluster? You have to give me that term.
Cluster concept.
Yeah. Cluster concept. So it's certainly in that area as well.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Did you have something else?
Yeah. No, that's probably it. There's more layers to AI art, but yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I hear an artist out there that's waiting for the controversial part of this video to start and be like, well, okay, we don't care what art is. Let's get into AI. So, okay. Okay, so, well, first of all, good to see you, Shepard. Phobes. Hardwick says, isn't the problem with postmodern art the idea that intent is all that matters, divorced from skill? A banana taped to a wall can be art if there's artistic intent behind it? That's a question.
That's also kind of divorcing. Part of postmodernism is divorcing art from the artist as well, which is another conundrum. Like, it's like if, your personal interpretation can be correct. Like, that's the death of the author. It's like, well, Frodo and Sam are gay because I interpret them as gay. It's like, I don't think so. I think the intent of the artist actually matters for art. And while you can have a subjective experience of it, obviously anyone can have a subjective experience of anything. That doesn't mean that your subjective experience of art is just as authoritative as the intent behind art. So what's a banana taped to the wall? The artist has to explain what it means, what his intent means. And then we have to be like, well, is that art? Because it's not, I guess you intended to tape it to a wall. Maybe that's the very limits of art. That's a lot of what postmodernism is about. Like, what is art? How far can we take art? Can I tape microphones to my larynx and eat crackers and that's music? John Cage actually did that. This was very famous. People came in, they heard all these bizarre noises coming out of the PA, and it was like 30 minutes of this. Audience got up, started walking around. They found John Cage on the balcony with microphones taped to his larynx, eating crackers and drinking water. And that was the music, right? So we laugh about this, but I think there is something kind of artistic about like making a big joke on everybody's behalf. John Cage is the guy who, like, the piano player opens up the piano and doesn't play anything.
Comedy is definitely an art. Yeah.
So he did stuff like that. He had music that was people making up lists of random verbs and walking out on stage and doing Mad Libs with them. And he's like, that's the music.
Okay, so
and then like a formula that would determine where they walked on stage while reading their verbs.
All right, so what is this art? It had artistic intent behind it when I used the AI to reprocess this image of Christian. Okay, first of all, I used Stable Diffusion, and every time I used it made him an old lady. So this is I guess an AI take on an old lady. Let's see who else. I also did. These are in the thumbnails for anybody that missed it. I did. This is one of my favorite photos of David playing his guitar. I ran that through, and I guess it thinks that he is Jennifer Lawrence, but I think it still did a pretty good idea or a pretty good job. And then let's see, where is it? Okay, I did this is the profile photo I use on Twitter and everything else. I ran it through, and this is what I got. Guys, I'm smoking. Look at this. All right, so the last thing I'll mention, and then we'll get into this, is that behind the scenes right now, let's see if I can share it. I am running AI Images, which is an app you guys can get and use I don't know what's happening with the borders of the screen, but you can use this to use Stable Diffusion to quickly and easily generate and manipulate images. If you would like to super chat throughout the course of this live stream, a prompt that you would like me to plug in here, I will see if my machine can melt while live streaming and generating an AI Stable Diffusion image for you. So there's that. All right, cool. All right, so let's get into the complaint from the artists. I have like pages of notes here, but I think this is a good place to start. So there is an association that was, I believe, recently created called the Concept Art Association. And they have recently started a GoFundMe, which is almost at $150,000 in donations so far out of a $270,000 donation goal. They are attempting to protect artists from AI technologies. They say support human artists. So let me just take a moment here to read a bit of their text, because I think this is the center of this entire discussion. And also will kick us off into the spicy content, probably. Okay. Hello, they say. We are the Concept Art Association, an advocacy organization for artists working in entertainment. Board member Carla Ortiz has been one of the leaders in our industry fighting back against the unethical practices happening in the AI text-to-image space. This word unethical is used everywhere in this discussion from their side with no definition or analysis of what it means. So I just want to highlight that right out in the beginning. They just say unethical, they declare it to be unethical, and then they drop the mic and walk away with the moral high ground. Okay, moving on. As an organization and as individuals, we deeply care about this issue, not just for those actively working as visual artists, but for future generations of artists and for the preservation of our creative industries. But before we dive into our plan, what are text-to-image AI ML models? A text-to-image model takes input from a user in the form of a natural language prompt and produces an image matching that prompt. To condition that capability, the model needs to be trained on a huge collection of images, media, and text descriptions scraped from the web and collected in the form of a data set in order to extract and encode an intricate statistical survey of the data set's items. Images are generated from an input prompt by assembling visual data that attempts to best simulate the statistical correlations between text in the data set and images in the data set in order to produce acceptable results. Some of this data is the copyrighted work of artists and the private data of the public. As these models produce derivative works based on probability and statistics. This is another important term right here. Based on probability and statistics. They are prone to reproducing biases, stereotypes, and copyrighted works present within their datasets. Essentially, it could be described as, quote, an advanced photo mixer generating potential derivations based on statistical probability. What are these unethical practices? Images and text descriptions across the internet are gathered and taken by a practice called data mining and or data scraping. This technique allows AI ML companies to build the massive data sets necessary to train these AI ML models. Stability AI funded the creation of the biggest and most utilized database called LAION 5B. I'm just going to say LAION 5B database, originally created on the pretext of research, contains 5.8 billion text and image data, including copyrighted data and private data, gathered without artists, individuals, and businesses' knowledge or permission. Midjourney, Stability AI, Prisma AI, Lensa AI, and other AI ML companies are utilizing these research datasets that contain private and copyrighted data for profit. They did so without any individual's knowledge or consent, and certainly without compensation. What do we plan to do about it? Basically get the government to create laws and regulations. I'm not going to read all that. We can if you guys think it's important. Basically, the point of this whole thing is to raise money so that they can hire a full-time lobbyist in DC, a full-time employee to coordinate an asset creation of all policy and PR needs of the movement, basically hire an artist. I could have just said that. And federal and state payroll taxes for the employee. Then it's going to be a lobbying group, effectively attempting to get the government to ride in on a white horse.
And I expect Disney to perhaps covertly co-opt this and or fund it, because anyway, we can get into it. But I think one of the dangers of, there's always a danger of getting the government involved in anything, because they generally make everything worse. I have a really hard time thinking of any government regulation which has somehow improved any industry. I mean, it's really hard. I have to rack my brain. I'm like, I don't know. It's hard. I have a hard time coming up with one. But you can bet that if they can shut down Midjourney, that Disney, which owns a lot of copyrighted works and can actually generate their own data sets within that, they'll make use of AI tools because it can help them put out more content. Why would they not do it? They're the ones that really stand to benefit from that kind of legislation.
So for my part in this, I'm looking at the overall landscape of the world and technology and innovation and what innovation does to people. And then I'm also looking at the very specific things in which the people aren't really thinking about that AI is about to do, if not already doing. So from the macro perspective, like I said earlier, this is like a tale as old as innovation. Technology is created, technology is improved, jobs are lost, jobs evolve. People have to find new ways to earn a living. They have to find new professions to move into to pay the bills. And during that process, depending on the number of people, every time, if it's a large technology that negatively affects a lot of jobs, those people, naturally, you expect them to kind of freak out. And when you have an entity like the government in place that can point guns at literally everyone to artificially preserve their jobs, there's always going to be a call to do that and to make that happen and to get the government to point at people to prevent this new technology from coming. This is exactly what these people that we're just talking about here are getting ready to try and use the guns of government to do. And finally, we're at the title of this video. Why I named this video, I can't even find it now. Artists are violently wrong on AI art. Because they're not just upset, they're not just calling for companies to be good digital citizens and to willingly not allow their art that they upload to these various art sites to be used to generate AI models. No, they're not asking for voluntary solutions. They are going straight to the government. Why? To get the government guns pointed at literally everyone to prevent all of us from using our property and technology in a way that would prevent them from being as easily able to make money. They are using guns to create and to guns have already been used to create to create intellectual property. And there's lots of content on this channel about that, and we can spend some time on it. We probably should, because there's probably going to be a bunch of new people to this channel watching this video because of the topic that it contains. Intellectual property is an invalid form of property because it is created through the use of threats of violence. And the people on the screen, like David, if you disagree with anything I'm about to say, you're certainly welcome to talk through it with me here, or agree to whatever extent you'd like to. Let me just get the argument out there first. So, intellectual property began as, without going to a super long history of it, it began as a guy borrowed a Bible from another guy, and he agreed to have custody of the Bible for a certain amount of time. His time was about up, but he still wanted to be able to have a Bible of his own to read or whatever. I'm grossly simplifying the story. So he had one of his people, who's a rich lord or something, copy the Bible. And the king, the person who had the original Bible was upset that his Bible was copied. So they went to the king, and the king basically slapped the guy's hand and says, no, you don't have the right to copy that thing because it isn't your book. It was like the calf of the cow. I forgot the specifics. Maybe the lamb of the sheep. is the property of the owner of the sheep. And so because your copy was made from that Bible and that Bible belonged to the other guy, then so too does this copy that you made of the Bible. In the same way that the lamb born to a sheep is still the property of the owner of the sheep. That was like where copyright began, intellectual property began. And then from there, it was used and manipulated nefariously around the world to prevent the general people, the general public, from being able to have knowledge by making like printing presses and easily copying information. So if the ruling class can keep people from copying books, then only they can be educated. And so there's a big power dynamic there that was a problem for the ruling class back then. And so the copyright laws, again, I'm oversimplifying, were sort of expanded and strengthened during that time. Then when the US was created, they saw it as an opportunity to compete with the rest of the world quickly by putting these things in place. So when you create something and then use the government to enforce your copyright over that thing, you are basically asserting a property ownership claim over the property of every other person on the planet and how all those people can use their actual property, their real property, let's say. So if I've done this before on the show, I'll get a piece of paper or, whatever, and I'll scribble this picture of Christian or Christina, let's say. And now that I've created Christina here, let's say it's mine. Let's say I own the copyright. I now have an ownership claim over literally all of you instantly around the world. I don't care where you are. You do not anymore have the right to arrange whatever property you can think of into a shape that looks too close to what I just created. Magically, by the power of the threats of government. It is property through violence. And so I've been talking a lot, so I'll shut up now and let you guys have a word in. The last thing I'll say is the reason why I named the video Artists Are Violently Wrong is because they are trying to preserve their industry using actual violence of government, guns and threats of violent force from the government on people to create and preserve their intellectual property, just because there's this new technology out there that has expanded the way for people to create art. All right, I think I've said enough. So, David, do you have anything to say? And then we'll go to Christian.
Yeah, sure. So this is something a lot of people forget, is that all government laws are backed up by the threat of violence. This is something children understand, but somehow by the time we get to be adults, having gone through public school and have, the mind worms injected into us, people forget that that's how it works. Like I remember substituting for a class, and there was like a kid asked, "What happens if you don't pay your taxes?" And I asked the class, I'm like, "What happens if you don't pay your taxes?" They're like, "They take you to jail." And I'm like, "What if you don't want to go to jail?" And they said, "They kill you." These were like 7-year-olds. So like, the police will kill you. I'm like, they understand, like the child understands it, but somehow the adult will be like, "Well, I don't understand what'll happen if I don't pay my taxes. I've never even thought about not paying my taxes." There's a threat of violence behind every law. So a lot of people don't think about that. Like, well, the government should just come in and do it. It's like you're basically you're saying, well, we're going to hire the police to go in and arrest people and jail them or kill them if they don't want to go, to enforce a law. Now, there are things, I think, I'm not an anarchist completely, but like, murderers, we'd like to do something about murderers, but that's not the same as somebody who like, well, I Xeroxed a couple pages out of a book and gave them to my class. Oh, very naughty. You Xeroxed too many chapters out of the book for the class reading this week. That's actually could be a violation of copyright law. The other thing about copyright law is that a lot of people, it frustrates me to no end, this idea in our society where like the law and ethics are always the same. If it's legal, it must be okay. If it's illegal, it must be bad. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And copyright laws are really complex and weird. And I'm not a fan of them. As an artist, I believe in intellectual property to a certain extent, which is that as an author, I have authorship of a thing, meaning that like if I wrote a book, it's my book, and people should respect that it's my artistic product. If you took my book and put your name on it and published it, you're just a liar at that point, right? You're lying that you wrote that book. So the connection of the author and the art is important for understanding like who owns the art. And I guess to that extent, people are like, well, George Lucas sold his rights to Disney. I'm like, that doesn't mean that it's like an actual Star Wars product. People have this, their brain just starts haywiring when they're like, of course it's Star Wars because somebody paid to make it Star Wars. Like, that's ridiculous. What a ridiculous claim to be authentic as far as art goes. So anyway, I guess that's my general thing with copyright. It really has to do with like you publishing something else that's copyrighted. And that's the heart of the question with AI, is that if I take an image off the internet, if I right click save an image, there's no evidence that I did anything bad until I publish said image when I'm not supposed to. But if you take it and an AI looks at it, is that a violation of copyright? They're not publishing the image. And if they're derivative works under US copyright law, derivative works are protected by copyright. 50 Shades of Grey is a Twilight fan fiction novel. A lot of people don't know this. 50 Shades of Grey is a Twilight fan fiction novel. And how did they publish it? Well, they just changed names of a couple of the characters, and you're good to go.
Is it actually?
No trademark.
Yes.
It actually is, yes.
Oh, wow.
That's
okay.
You can still find it, right? You can still find the original with their names.
Yep, you could find the original ones with Bella and what was the vampire?
Edward, I think.
Edward. You could find the original ones in there. So it was like imagining them if they met as adults or something like that. And then, I don't know, going off into the writer's mind about whatever sex stuff they would do. I really don't know why people like the book, but it doesn't matter. The point is, it's a derivative work. And even if it was fan fiction, it's copyrighted. If you write fan fiction, you own the copyright to the fan fiction. Under law, you may not have the right to publish said fan fiction for money, but Disney doesn't own your fan fiction. You own it. That's an important distinction. And this goes like all the way back to really early copyright laws where they were like, well, derivative works are their own thing. And, it used to be that you only had a 20-year monopoly on your intellectual property and then it entered the public domain where it's like, okay, we'll give you 20 years to restrict as much publishing as you want. And then after that 20 years, it's free game. Everybody can print it. Everybody can do whatever they want with it. Anybody can create derivative works without having to pay you money or ask your permission.
And then Michael Mouse got on hold.
Before I throw it to Christian, I just want to, again, shout out David's channel. So if you have heard me, anybody on this channel have heard me say that all the new Star Warses were just bad fan fiction, I got that idea from David. And watching his reviews and breakdowns of the Star Wars movies, highly recommend you go to his channel and check out his analyses of the Star Wars content. Really, really good stuff. All right, Christian.
And I actually think that's part of why Star Wars is bad, is that it's not George's work. It's not the artist's work. It's some phony. It's a fake thing. It's like a lie.
It's a woke corporation attempting to amp him. Yeah. Christian.
My favorite part of the conversation up to this point is that we spent all this time talking about what is art because we legitimately care and we think it's an interesting thing that we all like. And then we immediately come around and we're like, too bad, you all lost from square one. IP is garbage and your argument is invalid. And but it's like, so I think there's two ways to take this. If you're an artist watching this, it's like, oh my God, these people don't even believe in IP. But we spent 20 minutes talking about what is art for a reason. It's still something we care about. Okay, so don't take this as us being like we hate artists or something like that.
And here's the other thing too: is like if you're getting a benefit from somebody's work, wouldn't it be good to compensate them? Wouldn't you like to compensate someone if they gave you value? It's a different thing. Like if you hear something on the radio that's awful, like you wouldn't want to pay for that. But if it's like, man, I really got a lot of value out of that book, I'm glad I bought it, or maybe I'll tip the author or something like that. It's a service rendered. It's a service rendered rather than with a direct transaction where like, you're going to fix my plumbing and I'm going to pay you for the service. It's like, I'm doing this service, and if you get value from it, can you pay me? That would be good. That's closer to the way art used to work, like in the distant past. And in some ways, we're returning to normal by having technology really kind of break down the copyright law system. It used to be great artists were hired by patrons. There was no thought of who would control the art or own it. A patron, would hire a composer or a painter to paint a great work, and he would give them money and time to do it because he wanted that art to exist. He valued the art, and like we value art. It's not like the artist had to work for free or something like that. But the idea that artists can, create a piece of art and then license it a million different ways to a million different peoples, that's very 20th century. That's a very new thing. I think patronage is what we'll probably return to.
And it's interesting because, I'm sure we'll get into this later, and they didn't really touch on it in this example that you brought up earlier, but a lot of this ire that artists have is focused towards the corporations that are benefiting the most from, AI as a service and generating. I think Lensa was brought up in the example you shared, companies like that are charging for use of these AI models in order to create like profile pictures and things like that. But the funny thing is, it's going to be those exact same corporations that benefit the most by government getting involved and cracking down on who can utilize these AIs based on intellectual property standards. Like right now, like Patrick was talking about earlier, Stable Diffusion is a trained model and completely open source, and you can run that on your computer any way to Sunday. But let's say the feds decide at some point, very soon perhaps, that, hey, this is bad, you can't have this, you need to take it down. Does that mean if you're caught with it, you're currently in violation of copyright law and could be thrown in jail or something like that? That's not hurting Lensa, Disney. They can adapt, they can train new AIs, they can make agreements, they can fork out all that money. Really, who it's going to hurt is the small guys that they're supposed to be fighting for. And I think that's an interesting problem to find yourself in, where what is seen as the best course of recourse or best course of action for recourse is also probably the one that will damn you in the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And another author named Raul Nyanzi pointed this out to me on my channel. Was like, Disney is the one who's going to benefit from this because you think they're going to not use these tools? No, they'll develop their own in-house tools or, fork whatever the open source version was to make their own version and then feed their own things into the model because they own the copyright to those things, because we've created this mythical creature called a corporation that can own imaginary things called intellectual property and control them. So yeah, Disney's going to be the one who benefits from the legislative action. And then the little artists, this is, I don't know. This is a point I'll make. Most of the people complaining about AI art already don't make money from art. I think
shots fired.
Sorry, guys.
Shots fired.
Like they're mostly guys who are just not making a lot of money from art, and like, our customers going to stop using them? I think somebody pointed out on the channel was like, oh yeah, all the porn artists are the ones who are worried because people are commissioning them to draw porn of their favorite characters, and now like, well, I'll just have this AI make the porn of my favorite character, and I won't pay you $5 a month on Patreon to draw boobies for me. Oh no, my booby money! This is not fine art, I think. But yeah, a lot of people are just not making money on art, and I think other artists are worried about it in an existential way when what they're making can't really be replicated. Like if you're making a comic, it's a complex enough thing that, like, your web comic about your jokes are the big selling point, not necessarily the art. So you're not in any kind of particular danger of somebody replacing you as a cartoonist with, AI images.
For now.
There's and the other thing is, lots of artists and professional artists have already been using these tools for a while now as part of the process, not as a final image. You notice a lot of these come out looking weird. They're not really usable as a final product, but they can be a sketch that you then paint over or redraw. They can give you an idea of the color and the texture you may want to use. They can give you a compositional idea of the art, which you can then work on. Or you can do what I've done with some of my book covers, which is, rather than using stock photos to assemble a book cover, you use AI art images. You use 3 or 4 of those, and meld them together and you get like a cool little piece of art for your cover rather than having to Photoshop a bunch of stock photo people together.
I don't know if my computer's keeping up with this. If the stream is glitching when I start generating images, please say something. I'll stop doing it.
It's okay on my screen.
Fallstar, thank you for the super chat. He says art is the end product of creation, not the creation itself that muddles everything. As art exists where the creator had no intent or art. Man, it sounds like you used an AI to try and generate that sentence. I don't know what said, but
if we say art's a process, not a product, that's an interesting way of looking at it as well. That's part of like the artistic, like you're doing something. It's not, art can't be something which just exists, like the art of the tree. Well, I guess that's God's art, but that's not art in the way that we would think about it as art. It's a thing which just exists on its own.
Oh, true. How atheistic of me, by the way. I didn't even consider that when I was like, yeah, we wouldn't look at the trees and say they have intent behind them, but plenty of people actually do think they have intent behind them.
It's another reason I brought David on.
But that's not, I'm a Christian, so I think God created, it's a good world. I'm not one of these, there's a kind of like a Protestant mentality of like, the world is bad and fallen, or like the Gnostic belief that there's some sort of corrupt God that made an imperfect world. No, the world is good and creation is good and it's beautiful and it's okay to find beauty in it. It's good to find beauty in it. And the things which exist to God's glory all on their own without your intervention. But that's different from human creation. Human creation may be an imitation of God. It may be acting in a mode because we're made in his likeness and image. When we create something, if I create characters in a story, it's like I've created people the way God created me. It's kind of a reflection of that, but it's not the same thing as those things just existing because they're part of the world. We would recognize that a tree is not art because, it goes on its own. It's not something that's like fashioned by man. Art is an what is it? It's an anthro experience. I don't have a
anthropomorphic. Yeah.
Anthropomorphic it's an experience that follows the man. It's not something which is natural.
I see.
Natural things can be beautiful, but they're not art. They're just natural things.
Okay. So
anyway.
let me go to my notes. Thanks for the super chat, by the way, Fallstar. I put it in and generated some images. It looked like you got some kind of generic stuff. So if you guys want to super chat in, I will put whatever you super chat, as long as it doesn't look like it's going to create pornography. I will put it in the thing and generate some AI for you. So creatives and intellectuals used to think they were safe. This is one of the things Christian talked about. Like they think, okay, well, computers and technology, they'll be able to automate manual sort of labor type tasks and eventually move the technology forward. Only recently, they're realizing that this new AI technology is able to start encroaching on things that are creative, things that are intellectual, that require thought and reasoning to create. My own industry is no different. These AIs, ChatGPT, can generate functioning code. So me as a programmer, as my day job, the thing that makes me money, is under threat of AI as well. It's going to come for everything, I think, eventually. And I think I can't see an argument that will limit AI and technology in general from eventually automating or taking away everything. I think it's going to happen. Go ahead.
I think it would be very difficult or impossible to externally prevent the progress. I think it's really difficult. People find a way. In fact, it's like a theme in some of my books is like they've outlawed part of technology where it's like, nah, on the underground, people still come up with new stuff and they trade it and it becomes, it marches on.
I've said for a long time, whether it's, a massive tech think tank that develops it or some kid coding in the backyard of Siberia, when the first AI opens its eyes to the world, we're going to be in for a hell of a storm. And honestly, I think I'd kind of rather it be in the think tank than like walking out some dude's router. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
I'm curious what the theistic perspective is on AI becoming, potentially sentient one day.
I think, well, it'd be so far away from my understanding that I'm not particularly worried about it. And that's because we actually are not very good at defining intelligence. And we don't really know how the brain works or how we operate in the brain. If you're a complete materialist, there's an assumption that all you are is basically in your body. And as a Christian, you are your body, but you're not just your body. Like there's this, I don't know, again, there's a lot of Protestants who are like, my body doesn't matter. I'm like, no, you are your body. Like you are your body.
Dualism.
The soul is the form of the body. You're a body soul composite, but how those things operate are still pretty mysterious to us. Like we know how a neuron works, but not how a brain works. So eventually maybe it'll be something to consider and think about and consider the ethics of. But I think there's more pressing ethical concerns we need to worry about today, like, killing millions of people of our own species all the time. That's a much more pressing concern than what would an AI think about us in a computer? Would it feel? Would it be alive? That's interesting for sci-fi novels, but it's not that pressing in the real world for me, at least yet.
Speaking of sci-fi novels,
so far off, I'm not worried about it.
Alfredo just said, on the topic of AI replacing comedians, it's a good thing Manny got tied up in his revolution and didn't teach humor to Mike. It's a reference to Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein.
Oh, yes.
An absolute... Go ahead.
I really like that. I really like that book. I haven't read it in a long time. Starship Troopers is actually one of my least favorite Heinlein books, but I like Moon is a Harsh Mistress a lot. Because he starts with like an idea and then just follows it through all its different conclusions, and it's such a fun story too.
Have you done a breakdown or analysis of Moon is a Harsh Mistress? Man, I would love to see
haven't,
that.
But I'll crack it back open and maybe read it again, because I would really like to. People focus on the fact that I don't really like Starship Troopers. I don't like the politics in Starship Troopers. And I don't know, for whatever reason, people love the politics of Starship Troopers. And I felt like Heinlein moved past that. I don't think it's a particularly well-written book. There's not a great story in it. I feel like his other stories are just better. And Moon is a Harsh Mistress has a lot of fun stuff too, where like people are sharing spouses because of supply and demand. There's like a lot of stuff where you start with an idea and follow it through, and it creates like a totally different world and society. It's very interesting.
But an analogous one that makes you think, which is really good. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite books, by the way, and I always recommend to people the audio book. The audio performance on Audible for that book is one of the best audio performances I've taken in. Do you have any opinions on audio book versus reading the book, David?
I feel like there are different sensory experiences. I make audiobooks, I listen to them, but I also read real books. And depending on the book, I have a different preference. So if I'm reading something like Dostoevsky, I really don't like an audiobook. I like to have a real book because I'm stopping and thinking about what's in there. Same thing with Ayn Rand. Like I was like, I'm going to revisit Atlas Shrugged, and I had it on an audiobook, and it just was like, no, I can't do this. I have to have the book in my hands and like look at the words and stop and consider, because you read, you stop, you read, you stop.
Yeah.
Different books work better for audiobooks than others, but I think they're cool, and they allow a lot of people to get more information in a different way, and maybe in a way that works better for them. Not everybody's a visual learner. Some people like the words pop out more when they listen to them. Everybody's a little different.
What do you think, Christian?
I like them both. I do so much eyeball reading, but at the same time, I mean, I consume a lot of content that's like, I consider video essays like one step away from an audiobook in most cases. Yeah. And I consume a lot of that kind of content as well. So it's just, I think I definitely have certain preferences. I like really overly produced audio dramas a lot. For some reason, I just think those are super fun. But I do so much of both that I can't say I have a strong preference either way.
Yeah. Now, thinking of AI, like I would love to have a voice AI that could convincingly make an audiobook for me, to just save me the labor of having to read a book or to pay somebody a bunch of money to read a book. Audiobooks can be very labor intensive. Why don't I make more of them? Well, they're labor intensive, and maybe I would want to do, for some of the fiction books, record it myself so I could like do the voices or something. But it would be really nice for like a nonfiction book to just be like, AI, read that, and then someone who wants to listen, they have the option to listen, and I don't have to spend 20 hours making an audiobook for them, or
that's another job that I have done and do. I produce audiobooks. So far, only nonfiction. I'm kind of looking forward to my first fiction attempt at doing character voices, but I really enjoy the process. It is artistic, and AI will absolutely replace that industry one day. Like, you'll be able to say, like David just said, like, read me Moon is a Harsh Mistress as Morgan Freeman. Like done. Like it will
Yeah,
happen.
or it wouldn't even have to sell them the audiobook. Like they could buy the book.
Yeah.
And like it would just the ebook reader would just come with an AI voice and be like, oh, I'm busy right now. I'll just have it read the next chapter to me, and then I'll come back and read chapter 4. That would be great.
Yep.
Right now you have to pay a lot of extra for like, excuse me, sorry, little allergies. Yeah, you have to pay a bunch of extra to have like the audible version and the Kindle version, and they sync up pretty cool. But it'd be good if you could just read it and it would sound like a human and not like a robot reading this, like I am in Portal.
All right, so I have consumed in preparation for this show. I've consumed 6-7 hours of various podcasts and content and commentary from artists that are currently leading the drama around this topic. And if I'm summarizing, and if I'm not being too disingenuous, most of it is confusion. They don't really understand. Next to that, you have fear. Then a lot of these group podcasts that you're seeing out there right now are coming off as like group trauma therapy. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of incredulity. There's a lot of outrage. And there's not a lot of really like analytical thought. What I want to give people the perspective of is this is going to it's happening. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Even if you point the guns of government at people, you will not stop this. Even if you apply maximum violence in the United States and make everybody so terrified that they will not come anywhere near artificial intelligence, that will do absolutely precisely nothing to everybody in Russia, to everybody in China. Like, these people are still going to develop this technology. Their models will either be released for free or they'll be leaked. Like, listen, once the work has been done to generate the model, it's a file. Now, some of the models are several gig, but it's still just a file. So now you're right in the middle of every intellectual property file sharing controversy that's happened since Metallica against Napster. How confident are you really that these files aren't going to get spread all over the internet constantly from here on out? Well, if you think that there's like right now today, you can download any movie you want online for free, in spite of everything that's happened over the past 20 years with the MPAA and the RIAA. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this is just a great point about like copyright stuff. Is if we just live in a world where, for all practical purposes, you can't control your work. Like, you can't control your digital file. I don't put DRM on any of my books. Maybe people will give a copy of an ebook to a friend, like, oh no, I lost $2.99. It's like, nah, just if they like it, they'll buy it. Who cares, right? But we're in a place where, in a practical sense, you can't control it. So where do you go from there?
Using the government is creating an artificial blockage in technology. Yeah. And technology is really, really good at routing around artificial blockages. And I can give you almost limitless examples. So Ross Ulbricht created the Silk Road, which democratized a bunch of drug cartels into competing with each other non-violently on the internet to sell their products. Like, technology had this artificial blockage of the governments not wanting people to buy and trade illicit goods, or goods that were considered verboten. And that was an artificial blockage on the trade of goods. Technology routed around that.
Yeah, just as an aside, back in like 2012, I think, we were, Bitcoin was still a pretty new thing, and we were real excited about it. I'm like, what are we going to use these Bitcoins for? And my friend Jim was like, we're going to mine them, and then we're going to sell them to drug dealers because they're the ones who trade the Bitcoins. So I'm like, oh, what? It's like, I was trying to wrap my mind around it. This was the big thing. It's like, oh yeah, what do people use Bitcoin for? It's like, well, we sell them to drug dealers because they use them as currency because they can't use anything else. So they just use Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, this is like an interesting system.
Yeah. So I just want to point out that all you're talking about doing, your best case scenario, maximum violence slider all the way to 11, is you create a temporary, somewhat effective artificial blockage in technology that will be routed around, if not by somebody in the US. And they say in rebuttal to that, well, it takes massive resources and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to gather enough data to train a model, a lot of money for the processing power to then train the model on the massive data set that you've collected. This is not something that laymen are able to do. So all we need to do is regulate the corporations that are creating these things. Problem solved. Again, look at literally all technology over the past 100 years and just like ask yourself, how long do you think it's going to be until somebody sitting at home in their mom's basement will be able to train AI models? Not that long, because the data is out there.
I look forward to what people in their mom's basements are going to make as far as movies using AI. It's like, can we get some non-shitty movies made by people in basements? I would love that.
Yes. Yes. And then go ahead, Christian. I've been talking a while.
I was just going to say,
floor is yours.
Someone did a write-up about the accessibility of images, and they were using the Wayback Machine as an example. And it's like, it would take you quite a bit of time to do this, but there's nothing stopping anyone right now from just like making a bot that crawls through the Wayback Machine and pulls all of the images out and keeps all of the tags and sorts them and files them accordingly. That can then be fed into an AI and trained and whatnot. And sure, there would have to be a little bit more work done in the background, but like acquiring these things is not an impossibility. It's not exclusive to multi-million-dollar companies, and it's especially not exclusive to companies in the United States. It's just not how it works.
They can't keep child pornography off the internet, which is a universally horrible thing that everybody hates. What about something that people actually like? You think you're going to keep that off the internet? Probably not.
Yeah. Comrade has a very, I don't know why you're called the Comrade. You're probably watching the wrong channel, but it's time for every person to be able to generate their own Marvel movies on their home PC. It is only a question of how long until that's possible, not a question of will it be possible. That's what I'm trying to. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it could be art in the future, like cooking. Like you cook a dish to your desired taste. Maybe you cook up art to your desired taste, and you're able to do that as an individual. I'm a big fan of technology for improving art. As a musician, you can listen to my music. It sounds like a band playing. It's just me overdubbing myself. This would be like, am I putting musicians out of work by not hiring a drummer and not hiring a bass player to come in and play parts with me? Or does that facilitate me making art that otherwise would not be made because of the limitations of having to play with a live band? I'm in the latter category, and I kind of see AI art as the same thing. It facilitates people to make things they otherwise could not have made. So the amount of art in total will increase. You're going to increase the supply a lot, which is not bad for people who are looking for better art, I guess.
And okay, so I've got a bunch of bullet points that I took from my hours of consuming their content. I'm going to read through them and comment. You guys interrupt me if you have any thoughts. I'll just shut up and you can take the floor anytime you want, because there's some good nuggets in here that warrant discussion. They want to have a place at the table with the people making AIs. They want to have input into how these companies are using it, and they intend to go straight to the guns of government with legislation to force themselves into that table. Go ahead.
I'm slapping my button. I have to say this. Holy crap. Okay. You know what? I'll be a little nicer than that. Maybe you're an artist who's listening to this, and I want to come off as someone who's like, I don't like hate you. I want you to be happy. Okay. This is just how I see things. No one in there has ever in their entire lives had a right or like a duty or an obligation or a entitlement to be an artist and make money being an artist. Not a single person. There's not a human alive who's born with that. Yeah. Nobody. You are there by circumstance and a little bit of luck and a whole lot of work, most likely. And all of those things are conditional and not intrinsic to you or your being. I see a lot of people who are like, well, we deserve to continue to make money making art. Could you imagine, like, go back to previous technological revolutions? We go to the people who used to put the punch cards into the old computers back in the day to program them, right? And they say, we deserve to punch punch-cards and live off of that, even though it has no productivity and nobody wants it and yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, we shouldn't develop microprocessors and whatnot that allow us to do this way faster, better, cheaper, etc. We deserve the money. That is so crazy to me. Like
Yeah,
that can only come from a position of entitlement.
Yeah, it's you see this with like these delusional Westerners fantasizing about the socialist revolution. What are you going to do in the socialist revolution? Well, I'm going to teach kids this, and I'm going to make art. It's like, no, buddy, you're going to be in the rice paddies because Commissar Bubba says you're going out there. White collar hippie, you get out of here. You know, people are completely delusional about like the way resources work with this. They're like, of course, like if we had socialist government, then I'd be able to be an artist. It's like you might be in a middle institution if the USSR has anything to say about it, right? If we've done this before, and the result is, you don't get to make the art you want to make. You don't get paid to tape bananas to the wall in the USSR. They've put you in a middle institution for that. In the US, you get paid for that because of money laundering, but I guess that's another story. Yeah, it's like these people are completely delusional, thinking like, I deserve this. Like, I've never said I deserve to get paid as a writer. I want to write books that people like, and if I get paid for that, that's great. But if I'm getting paid, that's because I'm deserved to get paid because someone liked it. Somebody got value out of the product, not because I just intrinsically deserve things. Now, why do you? Anyway, go ahead.
Just one more quick thing on this. This is going to sound, this is going to sound like me flexing my amateurness, but I grew up in a time when like doing art for the sake of doing art and not caring at all if you made $1 off of it was seen as like a really like almost virtuous thing. It's like, wow, you're not like trying to shill. You actually just enjoy this and get something out of it. Like that's really cool,
People want to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, that's not saying professional artists are shilling by any means. Like I said, a lot of them, circumstance, luck, and hard work, all in a big combination of those things. But, at the same time, I do not expect nor demand, nor would even suggest that I make money off of these things that I do for fun just because I like doing them. Like I have my job, I have my hobbies, and I think that it's very healthy that way.
Yeah, and this is also a return to normalcy. Like the 20th century is kind of a weird blip as far as our arrangement and our relationship to art goes in a lot of different ways. But one of those is the idea of like the professional artist making money doing art, or like the movie star or the rock star. That's not the way that music or art functioned in past ages. Somebody painting icons in the 11th century didn't get paid to do that. They did it as a religious exercise, and they would never even think about somebody paying them to make an icon. They'd be like, "No, I'm gonna make it as part of my religion."
They didn't used to like sign their paintings or anything, right? That wasn't.
A lot of times they did, and sometimes newer icons. To me, it'll be listed in the Eastern tradition in the hand of so and so, not by so and so, because they don't even view, like, if you're drawing a picture of a saint, you're supposed to represent that saint, not your interpretation of the saint, but who he is in a real sense, in a spiritual sense, in a real sense. So it's not even you doing the art necessarily. Like you're just kind of, it's part of your exercise of your faith. And then of course, like medieval monks writing down music and writing down chants. They never got paid for that and never signed their name. There's all these medieval compositions we have. We don't know who wrote them. They're by the most popular composer of all time, anonymous, because that wasn't even on their radar that they should sign their name to this thing that they made as part of the church. And likewise, folk songs, nobody cared. Like you made up a folk song, you sang it. People were like, I like that. Could you teach it to me? Like, yes, I will. Or here you go. They would teach it because they liked spreading around their creations. They didn't do things. A traveling troubadour might get paid for his performance, for entertaining people, right? A traveling acting troupe. But they didn't sit there and think like, well, this is my play that I wrote and you can't do anything like it. That's not the way that cultures transmitted art at all. This is a very novel way of thinking historically. Mm-hmm. People made art in the context of all the other things that they did.
And I have two things. Like, number one, in response to everything you guys have been talking about, is the adage, your shitty business model is not literally everyone's problem. Like, if you can't find a way to monetize what you enjoy doing, that's not everyone's problem. And you shouldn't point the guns of government at everyone to preserve your ability to make profit. The second thing I want to... Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say there are solutions for artists, which we can get into. You don't have to accept
Yes.
this idea that we have to use the government to force everybody to not use AI art or you won't make any money. There are ways that you can make money that don't require any of this interference.
And there's unique advantages to those methods too, which, I mean, yeah, we can do a whole show on how to make money absent IP law. The second thing I wanted to say, place at the table. They want a place at the table. They're demanding. They feel entitled to a place at the table in these companies that are pouring massive amounts of money and funding into generating these models. You don't just get to demand your way rightfully into a conversation or into control of a company. The people that get a say in how a company functions are the people that put up money. They buy an ownership share in the company. They get on the board of directors either through having industry knowledge that's vital to the success of the company or by buying ownership in the company. You guys have heard about Twitter recently, right? Like he wanted a share. He wanted a say in how Twitter, Elon wanted a say in how Twitter was operated. And so what did he do? He bought the company. He owns enough of the company now such that he gets to control how it's done. So if you guys want to say at the table, if you want to place at the table with OpenAI, what are the companies?
Stability AI,
Midjourney,
Lens, Midjourney.
Then go, instead of raising $160 to go beg politicians to point guns at people for you, you violent assholes, use that money to buy ownership in some of these companies. And then you will have a rightful, justified seat at the table to affect how those companies operate and move the technology forward. That's how you do it.
Here's my only rebuttal, and it's going to be one of their points, is like our images are what are feeding and enabling this thing to exist. You're using our work to do it, therefore we should have some kind of say in how that operates. So that's going to be their rebuttal. I would push back against that a little bit in that, like, we don't really know what they've plugged into their data set. It's not like they've published every single image that the AI has ever looked at. So I think there's a lot of crappy artists that are like, you're using my art. It's like, probably not. We've fed a bunch of paintings from the 19th century into it because those look better than what you did. But okay,
the Twitter furry porn.
I thought I was going to be the spicy one on this stream. David's all about it. What'd you say, Christian?
I said the Twitter furry porn artists out there are worried that their art is getting stolen by the AI when it's probably skipping directly over that.
I think those are the people who are upset, are the people who are like, what? I got my Patreon money for drawing porn. What's going to happen if people can draw their own porn? I don't know. Pornography, we should do a whole nother stream on just like pornography, because it's been such a bizarre thing, the way the internet has affected that. But yeah, I think there's artists who do these weird little niche things and they think it's somehow their art's getting stolen. As far as I guess, I don't know I hate to call it fine art, but that's what they call it. Like academic art in the 20th century, it's pretty much a wasteland of garbage. You have to go back to the 19th century romantics and post-romantics before you start to get really good images that people will actually want to look at. Other than newer commercial artists. So I think newer commercial artists might have something to say about it. I don't know. Anyway, that's the point. It's like, if their art's being used in the software, does that mean that they get to say something about how the software is being used? I don't know.
I don't know. My data gets used by Google to optimize their search engine characteristics, and I definitely do not get to sit on the board of Google. So
that's a good point.
Well, you assigned that agreement in the EULA that was 17 miles long. So no, let's dive into one tangent that I've heard through listening to all these conversations on that. Don't artists, it's like everyone that goes to like learn how to draw art, doesn't every single one like ubiquitously learn how to be an artist by looking at other people's art and then amping that style and learning those techniques? Like, isn't it like almost required if I wanted to learn how to be a graphic artist to make derivative works on styles and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's totally allowed, right? Like every one of these
allowed to do it.
Every one of these artists that's complaining that is an artist probably did exactly what they're complaining about this AI doing to become an artist, right? Question mark. Doesn't
and
that
probably to get known? There'd be two sides. Number one is like you copy stuff, and you're allowed to copy it as long as you don't publish it, right? And even if it's copyrighted, but historically, that's always been the case. Artists have always copied each other. Sometimes they've copied entire compositions from each other with slight variations and things like that. The Renaissance, to some extent, was kicked off by the discovery of Nero's Golden Palace, buried in the ruins of Rome. A sheep herder fell down and was like, what is this? It looks like some ancient Roman palace. They went down in there. They uncovered all of these ancient frescoes that used art techniques that had mostly forgotten about. So all the artists came in and looked at them and reconstructed the techniques, and boom, you got all these realist techniques that pop out of the 15th century because of the discovery of first century art that got buried because the Romans were embarrassed about the palace. It was such a public embarrassment. They paved it over and they built bathhouses on top of Nero's palace because he was such an embarrassment.
So anyway, even as an internal critique, it seems to be a defeater for their complaints. Like, even if we accept IP and accept all of their premises, we can just say, hey, you do exactly what you're complaining about doing.
Yeah. And the other flip side of that is that a lot of them got notoriety by making fan art of other IP in general. So it's like, here's my Wolverine. And people are like, oh, I like that, and I'll share it. And that's how they gain followers, is by doing fan art of other things. And I've told other artists, I'm like, yeah, you should do that because people pay attention. They already know who Conan the Barbarian is. So you do some Conan fan art, and they really like the way you do Conan, and they want to see what else you do. And they might buy a print from you or something like that. So yeah, they're completely guilty of doing the exact same thing they're talking about. But somehow, if it's a machine doing it and it's a programmer automating a machine to do it, and the end result that's published looks nothing like what the inputs were, then that's the problem. But it's like that the machine happened to look at those pictures.
Yeah, I have recently. I don't look at a lot of Twitter art until and we were. I actually talked to you about doing a show on this because I wanted to hear your critique of Cyberpunk Edge Runners. I wanted to have.
Oh yeah, I have. There's so much in that, and I finished the Cyberpunk game. I have a piece of content I'm trying to put out on it, but I just haven't had time to edit the footage for it, like the video game footage, on the Gnostic questions that it has inside of it, which I think it does a really good treatment of it, a lot more mature treatment than most media I see that deals with it.
I can't wait to hear your talk through of Edge Runners. I've been looking at doing my own breakdown. I don't know, and I don't know what your impression of Edge Runners was, but the work struck me much more emotionally hard than I ever thought it would. It was one of those moments where the art took me completely off guard, left me thinking about it for weeks after. And so anyway, all that is to say, when there's a bunch of artists on Twitter that are amping the characters from Edge Runner in their, they're taking their own attempts at it, their own style at it, and they're doing exactly what these people are complaining about. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so let me just continue reading. I think there's plenty of stuff here. The thing I highlighted in the beginning was that suddenly all these people and all these podcasts that I've been watching are all moral philosophers, and they're very happy to tell you exactly what is and isn't unethical, when the most that they've done in the field prior to this was draw pictures. And I realize I don't mean to insult them. They're really nice pictures, but not in the moral philosophy field. And yet now they're all declaring certain things to be ethical and unethical, which is just like an obfuscated sort of manipulative way to just say they don't like people doing a thing, and so they're going to label it unethical. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they should be more honest and just say, well, I would like to be able to make money. Can you guys tell me how I can keep making money doing this? Right? Rather than let me fight against. Let me first think of fighting. I would really like to continue making money. That's a very honest and correct statement. Like, no one wants to not make money at this. So, say, I want money.
Instead, they point out like the bad stuff. They point out like, out of the 5.6 billion images and texts used to train Stable Diffusion, part of the model includes terrible things that it found on the internet, like non-consensual porn and ISIS beheadings and CP and private medical record photos and all this nefarious stuff, which taints the model that they don't like. Like, rather than just say and be upfront, like what you said, like, hey, we have a business model here, please don't hurt us. they try and poison the well of the model. Christian, what do you think about the philosophy and the ethic stuff?
Oh man, I've listened to like 8 different usages of the word humanism. I've said we're humanists. We have to be humanists, and there's a lot of I've gotten 8 different definitions on what humanism is now as well, because it's almost like they all just kind of use a term that they think maybe means against robots, and then like run with that, and they talk about how ethically good that is, and et cetera, yada yada. It is a little annoying. Obviously, as someone who's put a lot of time both in academic settings and outside of academic settings into studying this stuff for someone, it would be like me coming in and calling myself an art critic. And that's essentially what's happening here. It's like I know nothing about identifying art by eras or by artists in most cases, or what style of brush techniques would have been used at what time periods, or what goes into the background of setting up a canvas for most things. I don't even know how to use oil paintings, for Pete's sake. But I could call myself, and say like, hey, I'm an art critic, and I'm going to tell you exactly what art is. That's like asserting what is the ethical for these artists. And if they're offended by that, well, then they should also be offended by me pretending to be an art critic. It's ridiculous. There no justification from first principles, all bare assertions, and it's as vacuous as you would expect it to be because of that.
I just told the AI to generate a bunch of advertisements.
Oh yeah. Now this is, think about ads. If you're running an ad company, the money for a while has been in targeted ads. Imagine if you could target an ad, not just by like what we're going to match our product to person's interests based on these, Google data sets and stuff and Facebook. But not only that, but you could show them the ad, which is going to appeal to that person the most. Like you'd be using these tools nonstop to generate like really like super target specific ads. In fact, I would be doing it. I would be doing it in a heartbeat. That would be like my first thought. Like, man, we got to use these. We can like make 100 different variations of the ads in the same amount of time it would take us to make 2 ads, and then we can really finally segment all the direction to like really target what a specific person's interested in seeing about our product. Now that might be, maybe that's a little bit disturbing to say, but like from a sales perspective, it's like that could be a real boon. The point of advertising is not to sell people things that they don't want necessarily, but to inform them about things that they might want. And I approach that with my books. Like I advertise my books. Maybe you'll like this book. Not like, let me tell you something that's false about this book so you'll buy it. I don't want that. Then you'll give me a 1-star review, and then it's going to be harder to sell my books.
I mean, it's easy to brainstorm without even in-depth knowledge of the technology, all the industries that are next on the chopping block. Voiceover work we already talked about, programming we already talked about, but even more than that, you could have script writing AIs that generated a bullet point narrative plot arc of varying degrees, and then a human could come in and fill that in until several years after that, when the AI can then fill it in as well. Or you could
editors.
Editing,
Being
yes.
Being an editor, listen, guys, language has rules, okay? You know what that means? That means humans are really good at messing it up, and robots will be great at figuring out where the problems are.
Oh, hold on. Let's ask the author. What do you think about that?
I use several different grammar checking tools, including Grammarly and other ones. And I think we had spell check years ago in Microsoft Word, and nobody stopped and be like, wait a minute, this is going to put copy editors out of business. We don't want to hire copy editors. Why would I want to hire? I mean, no offense if you're a copy editor, but I don't want to spend money on it. I want to make a book that's good and readable. I don't want to pay an extra person for to check over every piece of grammar. So if you can reduce the cost of that, then that means I can put out more books. And also I can make a profit on more books. That's the other thing about AI art is like, if you can make a cover in an afternoon for like a couple of dollars, that means you only have to sell a couple copies to make your money back on the book versus a $1,500 painted cover. Very few people can sell $1,500 of a book, even though that doesn't seem like a whole lot if you're in other businesses. Like selling 5,000 copies as a book, for instance, is a bestseller. It's books sell a lot worse than people realize they sell. Even mainstream publishers have a lot of trouble selling books. I know guys that have had big advances and sold 1,000 copies and then got dropped from their contract because that wasn't enough. And meanwhile, indie guys are selling, making lots of money selling 5,000 copies. Anyway, the point is, wow, if you can make that cheap, then more people can put out their books without losing an arm and a leg. Why should someone have to pay $1,500 just to buy a ticket to maybe sell a book to someone?
They're creating an entirely new. This is an important IP discussion, intellectual property discussion. They are creating a new type of IP, like an aesthetic IP. Like, not only the existing IP is more about the specific individual work involved that gets the copyright, and you cannot copy that work. You can make derivatives of it, but what they're calling for now is almost like an aesthetic copyright. Like you can't make art in the style of Patrick Smith without his permission or paying royalties. That's a new type of intellectual property fascism, is what I would call it.
Yeah, and let me tell you, just as a practical matter, you really don't want to take suits regarding copyright infringement or plagiarism to court, because you don't know what a jury is going to say. It's like lawyers are want to keep out of it, because if you put it in the hands of the jury, it's a dice roll. I remember there was a lawsuit between Joe Satriani and I think Coldplay over this song that sounded exactly like Joe Satriani's song, right? Had the same chords, had the same melody. The problem was those chords and those melodies were like Pachelbel's Canon, which is from like the 1600s. It's the same chords that everybody's used in every song for 500 years. But Joe Satriani felt like it was so similar to his song. It happened to be at a really similar tempo and have kind of a similar melody that he was going to sue him over it. And all he wanted was a writing credit. He's like, give me writing credit and a portion of the royalties that you make off of it. And they settled out of court before they went to trial, because they're like, there's no telling. There's no telling what a jury's going to do. The jury could award $20 million to Joe or $20 million to Coldplay. There's no telling, because regular people could hear the two songs and be like, are they the same? They're different instruments. Or do the instruments make it different? They're clearly different songs, but are they close enough that we should award, So it's a big mess trying to hash that stuff out in court. Imagine how unbelievably unpredictable it would be if somebody could sue you over using an aesthetic. This would be insane. This would be like a horrible kind of legal tyranny.
Which is why they'll probably be successful, like at getting the government to do it, because it's a terrible idea, and governments love terrible ideas.
Yeah,
it can be expanded out in any direction from there too. Like, people are like podcasts. What happens when the style of Joe Rogan's podcast becomes something that's like suable?
Hey,
somebody on YouTube tried to trademark React videos.
Look, 3 months before the entire podcasting world converted,
video. That's my thing.
3 months before the entire podcasting world converted to vaporwave theme, I did it. So I own that. No one else can have a podcast.
Oh crap! Because I already did it. Man, I owe you some money. I'm sorry. I did it on mine too. Crap.
Oh man. Okay. So their counter-argument, one of the counter-arguments that they managed to squeeze out of their brains was that human cloning was stopped by making it illegal. Therefore, this can be stopped by making it illegal. Would anyone like to address that?
I can't send a human clone in an email.
Yet.
I can't 3D print a human clone at this point, so it's kind of moot, right? It's like, it's easy to make something illegal when there's like 10 people who might remotely have the possibility of doing it at some point in the future, versus it's everywhere. It's on a million computers already completely. And then there's, oh man, yeah, trying to get something off the internet, it's hard. Just ask people who have pictures that they don't want on the internet.
There was the group that did the do-it-yourself at-home insulin, which is absolutely illegal, but you can absolutely go and get the plans, and you can absolutely make insulin yourself at home. My
favorite thing, 3D printed AR receivers, man.
Yes,
good luck getting that off the internet.
Yes, I have the serial number 001 Ghost Gunner sitting right behind me right now.
Oh, cool. Sweet.
It's really neat. Yeah. So, and I have a Liberator.
Yeah, while he's getting that, I wanted just a completely funny story. Is my dad had this idea before he died that he was going to manufacture receivers for gun buybacks. He goes, I figured it out. They pay $75 to buy back your gun. He goes, I can make this receivers for $32, and then we'll make like 1,000 of them, and we'll just travel around selling back the receivers to the government and make all kinds of money. It's like we specifically make a gun for government gun buybacks and then sell them to people. Or you sell them to, you can only do like one at a time. So you sell them to 100 people. Those 100 people go to the Houston PD and be like, here's the gun for buyback. They're like, yeah, we got another one of these. And this actually finally happened in Houston, I think this year.
Yep.
Was that a bunch of people showed up with 3D printed AR receivers and they're like, I would like my $100 buyback, please. They're like, it's an operational receiver. We have to pay you. So yeah, people were making money 3D printing receivers and selling them to the Houston Police Department, which then sawed them in half or whatever they did to get the guns off the streets.
So here's some other things they're worried about. Christian, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's awfully bold of them to say that no one's working on human cloning because they didn't personally tell them about it. So just to say, and I'm not even making a judgment about cloning on that, by the way, just to make sure that's clear. But, to say that cloning adjacent research isn't happening to me is just like preposterous. But
yeah, okay. How sure are you that Commie China isn't working on that, or Russia, or come on?
Yeah, if you want a theistic perspective,
yeah,
a clone has his own soul, just like two identical twins have different souls and are different people. I don't think you should clone people, but if you're like, they were going to make a clone of me, it's like that. Actually won't be you. It'll be a different energy animating you. It's your soul is your animation. It's your motion. So it would be a different soul and a different person.
Where would the soul come from?
Substance dualism, ladies and
That's
gentlemen.
A good question. That's a good question. I guess it arises from you naturally. It's part of how it works.
Okay.
So, but it's a deeper question. I'll have the answer for you.
But, Christian, you can't just react like that and then not say anything.
Well, no, I just I thought that we were going about this like a more typical substance dualism where it's like, it comes from a realm of spirit or is in a realm of spirit and is like connected to us by the physical world by some way. Like take Descartesian dualism.
Yeah, I don't believe in that personally. So I follow the Orthodox way of thinking. It's like you are you, and there will be a bodily resurrection of you. That's the Christian belief. Gnosticism was like an early heresy. There's so many. We don't need to get into it, but we're going to get way far afield. But anyway,
okay.
You can't send a human clone through the internet, so it's a little easier to control cloning than it is 3D gun plans.
Until we get biology printers, 3D biology printers, then it's on. And that's the whole point of this whole thing.
That they have some like lab made meat imitation where they
meat printers.
The meat cells.
The common one is they grow the meat, but they also have printers that can assemble cells out of a little. They squirt them out of a little nozzle
to like a little hamburger.
It was 10 years ago that the first piece of beating heart tissue was printed. Human heart tissue, by the way. It was replicated and then layered.
And now they're using AI to generate patterns of heart tissue cells that they then print into functioning machines. So they ask the AI, I want a machine that is able to walk or move. And then the AI generates a pattern of cells. They print the pattern of cells and they grow it or whatever. I don't know what they do. Give it energy, give it glucose or whatever, and it starts walking. So like that's where we're at, folks. Like AI is generating sort of living tissue patterns.
It's bizarre.
Heart chimeras.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, art.
Yeah, art. So here's a real
art.
Here's a real Here's a real threat. So and one that they bring up in their videos. You're a designer, you're an artist working for a company creating, I don't know, whatever it is art people do for companies. And and you quit or get fired. And so rather than hiring somebody new, the company just takes all of your past work that you've done, feeds it into a model, and just generates their future art based on your style that you had when you were working for the company. Now they no longer need you. They can fire you. They don't have to pay you anymore, and they still get the art that they need. And that is a problem. That is unethical, they say.
That's an that is a more interesting.
I feel like I already touched on this.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
You already did all the work for them. I'm assuming in the contract that's the company's work now. Why are you entitled to anything after you leave that company? Why? Because you did it?
Because it's it's their style, it's their aesthetic. Remember, this is I really think they're trying to create a new classification of IP.
And this reminds me of some things that you'll get with an employer where they can claim that they own any inventions you make while on the clock.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that in a contract.
Yeah.
So this is an idea that's like everything you do on our clock is work for hire. So that includes making inventions. You don't own the inventions. We own the inventions that you make, and we own the patents to them as well. So I think that would be like the artistic version of something like that. And, you have to ask yourself, people working for, say, Tesla, they don't own, if they quit Tesla, they don't own like some part of the patent automatically. They were doing work for hire for Tesla, I presume. So I guess that would extend to art as well. And then I guess my other thing is I think we could think further outside the box than just working for a corporation as an artist and then getting fired and then having your work replicated. That's not the only option for artists as far as how they work and how they can get paid and who they're working for. And I think there's a potential with the advent of technology. And I said this back in 2015 or 2016, GPUs, and this was back in when the best GPU was a GTX 970, which is and then the 4090s are so good. I'm GPUs will get so good, people will basically be able to live render CG quality stuff for movies, and they're basement, and they could just buy assets from the Epic store or wherever, from the Unreal store, and make, using game engines, CG stuff that's just as good as the movies. That will be a great thing, because that means you won't have to buy into the big corporate machine to get good art. That is a boon for everybody who likes art. It's not just a boon for the guy working in his basement. Now, the VFX artist working for Disney might be out of the job. But for humanity as a whole, and especially for the guy who really wants to make something but can't get hired by Disney or can't get his ideas done by Disney for millions of dollars, that's a boon for him. So it's easy to look at the guy who loses his job. It's what about everybody else who benefits? Yeah, there's a guy who lost his job when we created assembly lines 120 years ago, but it let everybody afford a car that we can drive around wherever we want to. The raising of material standard of living that technology has brought us, no one questions. It's only when it impacts us as an individual that we start to really question it.
Well, I've kind of hit the end of most of my cogent bullet points, so I'm happy to maybe go to closing thoughts from everybody. I can start, or let me start, and then I'll give you guys the last word. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Any area or facet of this before we close?
I would like to say beginning. It's just the beginning. This is, I don't think enough people realize how fast this train is moving. This is a conversation that should have happened 5 years ago if they wanted to have any impact on it. Now I've been following very closely, specifically OpenAI's GPT algorithms, and I'm starting to become very convinced by their claims that it can do just about anything they want to throw it at, give it enough time and data. And when, they're just going to keep getting more efficient, they're just going to keep getting better. And I'm not asking anybody to panic. I'm just saying, don't let yourself be the artists who wait until the product is released and now they're wondering what they're going to do with their lives. Maybe keep on top of these things just a little bit, but
I'll say there's a couple of things. So first of all, we already excised, not to repeat too much of stuff I've said elsewhere, but we kind of excised artists from a lot of our creative endeavors years ago. You're not going to find a lot of painted book covers because they're too expensive. And there's not enough artists who can actually paint a book cover because our universities don't train artists very well at all. Most artists are really bad at their job, frankly. And so to find one who's good and then can also do it for an affordable price, that's really hard. So that's why we started doing photo book covers years ago. Readers would still buy the book. They didn't stop buying the books because there was no painted art on them. And so guys, the ship already sailed. I saw that Tor apologized for using a piece of AI art that they bought off a stock photo website. It's like they were buying stock photos. They still were not hiring an artist to do the book cover, guys. They would never even consider hiring an artist because they don't want to. They want to go the cheapest route. So sorry, guys, that ship has already sailed. The other thing I was going to say is artists, there's no destiny that you cannot make money being an artist and you can't gain a following. There's no destiny to this. I'm going to point you to one of my good friends. His name's Jesse White. He's an absolutely fabulous traditional comic artist. He does everything with pens and inks. And there's something that you lose, I think, from going from pen and ink to digital. There just is. There's a little bit, it's more labor intensive to do it the real way, but that's what he does. Now, he doesn't just sell his prints. He has tutorials that he sells. He has a Patreon. If you like him as an artist, you can patronize him at a micro level. You don't have to be a rich duke of some Germanic princedom like we had in the past. As an individual, you can be like, I want to support this artist because I love what he's producing and I love his mind for it and his passion for it. I'm going to give him $5. You as a person can do. We've been trained through corporate art to not think that way, but absolutely, you can be a patron of the arts and not be rich, and that's what's beautiful. So artists, there are solutions. You got to think outside the box. Neo patronage is probably going to be the new model for people to go forward to interact with their customers, give them what they want, and to produce art that gets them attention and gets them money and is fulfilling to them spiritually and emotionally and all of those things. It doesn't have to be working for some corporation. You can be a comic artist and have lots of people pay attention to you and want to pay you money without having to schlock your way through a Wolverine number 7 million for Marvel Comics and getting paid almost nothing to do that anyway. There's other ways to do this.
The Neo patronage thing is familiar to all of you. Like all of the supporters of this channel, you are a patron. Mm-hmm. You are patronizing. Is that a valid way to say that? I don't know. You're supporting the channel with your money. Your money comes to us. I'm able to use it to pay our producer Fallstar, who helps watch all the communication channels, publish all the videos, do all the work of making the channel able to produce more content because I don't have enough time in the day. This is not by any stretch a career for me or a full-time job. That said, if you want to be a patron, disenthrall.me/support. You can support the show. You can be a supporter, and you can get your name on these beautiful works of art, like I did here in the intro. You have we put the supporters' names in a lot of the backgrounds. That's awesome. We do. I lost it. Awesome. Here we go. Okay, so I guess here are my thoughts. You guys are still welcome to interrupt me at any time if this sparks a discussion point in your head. So don't feel like I'm shutting you up or trying to end this thing. They are coming to control you and your property with the guns of government and any other means necessary. And they think that they are the righteous victims. There will be regulation. It's definitely coming. I don't see how it's not going to happen with the amount of outcry and money that they're putting into lobbying. That regulation will be ineffective, as most other intellectual property-based legislation is. AI tech will continue to improve in spite of any regulation. The AI tech will make more and more intellectual and creative jobs more and more obsolete over time. This is something that will not be reversed. It probably won't even be slowed down. It will probably accelerate. There's hypocrisy involved, like I said earlier, with every single artist that's complaining about this having learned how to draw by looking at other people's art to practice the techniques found in them, and they did not credit or compensate the artists of the work that they often used to learn how to be artists with. We need to, I think, to David's point earlier, I had this as a single sentence, but he really expounded on it. I think it's forcing a redefinition of what creative work actually means, what it means to be an artist, what it means for something to be art. I think it is also an interesting thing to think about when you take art from a form of, ink on paper, watercolor, oils, whatever, and then you digitize that, you turn it into a bunch of pixels. Well, now the art is sort of captured in a data form that can be looked at from a totally different direction entirely. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Like, we can apply our engineering tools to treat those color pixels as data that can be manipulated in an entirely new way. Like, the things that are manipulating these images are not even sentient. They don't even know what art is. It's literally computer code running pixel data through a complex algorithmic model and spitting out stuff on the other end, and then doing that over and over until its algorithm says it's done a good enough job. And so it's just interesting to think about reality, looking at the same data from another angle. It's like a outside of human perspective angle. I don't know. That's probably the beginning of a conversation rather than a conclusion. So I apologize for that. But this must happen. We must develop AI, and we must refine AI technology if we are to continue competing with the world. And I mean that at a micro level, us individually, and a macro level, us as a country, or whatever that means, economies around the world. This is a thing. It will change the world. It will introduce a point of competition for companies and countries and economies. And if we resist, the degree to which we resist it is the degree to which we risk falling behind in the competition. It's another important thing to think about. It will happen because tech always wants to improve and information always wants to be free. And that is reifying technology into something that has motives and goals. But that's just an adage to point out how information usually works. It's very, very difficult to keep something private. It's very difficult to put artificial barriers in to limiting technological innovation. It rarely, if ever, works. The only question really is how bloody the artists are willing to make it to slow it down in the immediate term. I think that's really what this whole thing comes down to. They need to stop trying to resist innovation, especially through the guns of government. They need to adapt to this new world, as everyone always has when technology has made their jobs obsolete. This is not going to stop. Like, Elon's already working on a self-driving 18-wheeler. So there's a whole nother industry of jobs that's about to go out the window. Like, driving is going to be automated with AI.
The robots. He very specifically said he wants the Tesla bots to replace menial manual labor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, if robots did everything would be so cheap, you really wouldn't have to produce a whole lot of economic output to buy everything. People forget this. I mean, it made everything cheaper. The kings in the past didn't need running water because they had running servants. That's a Milton Friedman quote. You have someone to go throw your shit out the window. But now it's like everybody has a toilet that just takes their feces away from them magically. Like, that's amazing when you stop and think about it historically. We should be so thankful. And here was the other thing I was going to say. My point that I didn't get in that I mentioned before the show. AI art, it's so cheap to make AI art, it makes the idea of intellectual property kind of moot. It's like, what if I steal your AI art? It's like, you can steal it, or you could just make one exactly like it in 2 minutes. Why would you steal it if it's worthless? You know? No one, feel free to steal any AI art I put out. I don't care about it. You could just make your own.
You've been making your book covers in part using AI,
yeah,
right?
A couple of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they look great. People are like, whoa, that looks cool. I'm like, it saves a lot of labor. It saves me a lot of time having to mash up photos and like manipulate them and paint over them. It's just like, it's a big labor saver.
A recent video I saw you said, a recent video you did said that a good book cover artist will cost like $3,000. And so,
yeah, for a painted, like for like a legitimate, awesome painted cover, maybe more if you were going to hire someone like, one of these classic fantasy artists like Michael Whalen, you're just going to spend $10,000 to get a cover from him, So if you're a person trying to break into being an author and writing novels, I mean, it's a huge barrier to entry, I guess is the point. Like, if you want, and I'm into lowering those barriers. help people achieve their dreams. That's what I like to do, is enable people to do their work better, and get what they want.
All right. I have one more thing to say. Last call for questions. If anybody has any questions or comments, now's your chance to get them in. Okay. And so this I thought was going to be the most spiciest offensive thing I was going to say this whole time, but David said it like an hour ago. So, he said it in a better way even. What I was going to say is that, maybe this industry and their profession, the profession of artists, as moneymakers, has become an inflated bubble, earning way more for artists than it's actually worth through market manipulation that is government intellectual property regulation. Without the government regulation, maybe they wouldn't have been able to make entire careers out of, quote, doing art to begin with. So maybe, as tech so often does, when it routes around the violence and artificial blockages, any loss of jobs and incomes will just be a return to what it always would have been without those guns. And David said that earlier, probably better than I said it, when it's like a return to normalcy. Maybe this is just a bubble that was artificially created to begin with.
Yeah, I think traditional publishing is that in books. Like, people are like, what are we going to, like, people published their own books in the 19th century. Self-publishing was the norm. Only recently did we have this model of, like, we publish it and send it to stores and we give you a little bit of money, 1%.
Yep. All right. Well, those were my final thoughts. The floor is y'all's. If you have anything else you want to say,
please.
I think I said.
Yep.
I think I've pretty much said everything I have to say.
All right.
It was a really good conversation. We have to think about.
Okay. So I do want to take this. I've been having this conversation a lot recently in general. One of my classes that I took in my graduating semester was on philosophy of mind, and we spent a lot of time talking about artificial intelligence as a result. And I would come almost every week with some new bit of news or some cool piece of thing I saw that AI made. And I kind of have just been watching it move and accelerate. And I found myself in this interesting spot where I've been in the position of almost like the canary in the coal mine for a lot of people, because I think most people are extremely ignorant. And when this, and that's not like an insult. It's just like calling it how I see it, right? About what AI is, what it's doing, and where it's going. And they are not ready. And I think one of the worst possible outcomes is that this does have the massive and potentially long-term beneficial impacts that we all see it as being, and no one is ready for it. Everyone just kind of like stumbles over as soon as the AI train hits them. And that's where I see the greatest chance of there being like big negatives pushback and like this. Like, I think if artists had their pulse on this a little bit better, we wouldn't be seeing this like sudden visceral reaction to all this explosion of AI art. They would have been able to see it coming and have like less emotional responses to it as a result, and know what they're going to be doing afterwards and have a plan for the future. So that's really the big.
Like, I'm not left or right by definition. And I see most of this pushback coming from lefties.
Yeah.
It's very emotional. It's very emotional. It's very anti-corporate. It's very anti-profit.
Most artists are lefties. Let's just be real.
I've seen it. I've recently seen right-wing stuff too, but it's more like a misplaced religious sentiment. Like, it's demonic, or there's it's transhumanist,
demonic,
or something like that.
Demonic.
Yeah, demonic has been the newest one. Yeah. And my question is like, okay, so the AI is a process happening on a physical machine. It's a material thing. So are the demons affecting that material object? And if they can just affect material, why aren't they just making you crash your car and killing you? Right? So in traditional Christian belief about demons are against you as a person. They're not like throwing cans against your head. That's kind of like, spook stuff from monster movies. That's not the traditional view of how demons are non-material. They have no body. So this was like a thing. Oh, this is demonic because these images look creepy. Well, they look creepy because as human beings, we're wired to look at other humans and be able to assess what other humans look like. It's why even a small problem with the human face, you're like, oh, that looks weird.
Mhm.
Like that uncanny valley effect. We're wired to look at faces. That's part of our biology. That's so of course we're going to notice anything that looks weird and we're going to find it disturbing. But that doesn't mean that demons are like playing with the levers to make weird images come out. And then why would they do that? Especially, why would they do that when they can just say, hey, when they can just send you a little whisper, there's a lot of free porn on the internet. You should probably look that up. Well, I think I will.
I like the idea.
I'm worried about the demons and the AI.
I like the idea of enslaving a demon just by hitting refresh on this AI generator. Like, no, you don't get to go away and haunt somebody. You got to stay here in my computer and keep twiddling these bits.
Making creepy images for me, please. All right, I was trying to get more people to jack off, but I guess I'll pull these levers.
Yeah. It's too late for the artists, I think, is my big point. I've said it like a billion times now. If they wanted to do anything about it 5 years ago was the time to make a lot of people, time to get the social media engine running and for people to, petition and lobby and whatnot. It is too late now. The cat is out of the bag. The money is being made. You've lost. This is over.
My point was the cat was out of the bag long ago. They got rid of traditional animation. We got rid of artists on book covers and stuff. This is just the next nail in that coffin.
Exactly. So, and it'll continue. The coffin's just going to continue to get nailed.
I'm going to keep paying artists to do the things that I think matter and I want to pay them for. It's not like I'm going to stop hiring artists. But I'm just saying, AI art's here. It's already gone. Pandora's box.
That is one thing. I almost forgot to say this, so thank you for bringing that up. There will always be someone who wants a piece of AI, or not AI, of human art.
Sorry. Alfredo sorry to interrupt. You'll have to start over. Alfredo just said, so that's where my jack-off demon is. Yes, he's been enslaved in my AI computer. He's been busy. He'll have to get back to you. Sorry, go ahead, Christian. That was too good.
I was just gonna say, even if AI art can make things that are damn near perfect to every individual human's taste and know exactly what they want, there will still be people who is just like, it's just different when a meat bag draws on the paper. There's just something to it, and they'll still want humans to make art. Humans will continue to make art. This will not be the end of art. It just may be the end of some people's money-making ventures is all. That's really all this comes up to. Art is not going to die because of AI. If anything, in my future utopia, art's going to blow the doors wide open for lots of people to make art that they never could before. So,
I'm in that latter camp. I think it'll enable a lot of things. The way that music technology has enabled people to make so many different kinds of cool music that were just not possible 25 years ago. Just impossible. Like you can make a symphonic metal album by yourself in your basement.
That's crazy.
You don't have to hire a 100-person orchestra. It's amazing. But we don't think about that. We think about, no one will hire the violinist to play in symphonic metal albums.
That's crazy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been fun. And this has been one of my favorite conversations on the channel in a while. So I appreciate you guys watching. David, Christian, I appreciate you guys coming on. Davina and Christina. Hold on, where are those images?
Burn my image. No, just burn it. Don't put it up there.
I love that they just chose J-Law for David. That was great. Okay, guys. Well, I failed in advance to put links in the description to David's channel, so forgive me for that. It's just called David Stewart, right? I'll
you
get
can
the
find
link
it youtube.com/David Stewart Writer.
Okay.
There's another David Stewart who had just the David Stewart URL. Oh well.
After the fact, I will put the link in the description.
So there's that. I guess, and then my website dvspress.com. You can hop on a mailing list and you get a free ebook, I think. So you can download that and read it. I think it's still Water of Awakening, which is one of my fantasy books that I really had a great time writing. So I think you get that one for free. Maybe another one. I don't remember. I change it. I switch what book you get every once in a while.
Link in the description straight to his channel. It looks like the YouTube handle that they just started doing is at DVS Press.
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
Yep. So yeah, link in the description, and I'll put the link in the description after it's over. I literally recommend that all of you, if you enjoy art, if you enjoy commentary, if you enjoy good analysis on pop culture media, all that good stuff, if you want to learn how to write a book, definitely check out his channel. I really enjoy it. Christian, he's awesome too. He's got a fancy degree now. He wore a black dress for it and everything. So
I did.
He is legit. I look forward to having a talk with him about his college philosophy experience.
Oh boy, do we have a talk we need to have at some point.
Well, I mean, I when I was doing philosophy in college, it was 20 years ago, so I can only imagine what it's like now.
Do you guys have to go? If you guys need to go, we can end the show. Otherwise, I'm happy to hang out and talk about this.
I mean, I
need to use the
don't have
bathroom.
anywhere to be.
Okay, let's have a bio break and we can keep going. If you're down, David, don't feel obligated by any means. Okay, cool. We'll wait for you then.
I might bio break as well.
All
I don't
right,
know if we need some music for this or
be thinking about what you want to say about your college experience. I want to talk through it.
Yeah, we're gonna do this. What is it called? Improv style.
Yeah. Let's do it. All right, so the people that watched all the way to the end of the stream, you guys are getting a special bonus. Get your questions or thoughts in if you have any. I will be sitting here hanging out with you until they get back. Boom, look at me. I'm big now. I'm not usually big on the screen these days because I always have other people. This was fascinating. I think AI is coming for a lot of stuff that people aren't expecting it to come for yet. The more I think about it, the more ideas I have. And they're right when they say that it will improve artists' ability to make art faster. So, for example, if I wanted to make a new 3D rendered background, and let's say I needed like a really complex, like mountainous landscape full of trees and animals and stuff, that would take a long time for me to model, or a fair amount of money to go and purchase the assets to make it really look good and polished. I could just get the AI to generate that background stuff, and I can handle the foreground stuff that is the subject of the AI art. Another thing would be, I don't consider myself like a Photoshop artist because I can't. It's not in my brain to create art from scratch. That's not something I've really been good at in terms of drawing. But I'm very good at editing existing things. And this came from, I guess, being a photographer. A lot of what I did is I would take imagery and I would edit that imagery. I would touch it up. I would add to it, take away from it. I'm very good at editing in Photoshop. So what AI might allow me to do is generate a bunch of like stock assets that I could then use to, kit bash or mix them together and to create my own stuff that way. And that sounds awesome. What's up, Christian? Welcome back. I'm just kind of talking about the ways I think AI can help people in the immediate term. And then
it'll be huge.
I'm also looking for this image. But when I was doing photography, it was a photo competition. It was like 1,100 photographers, and they all went out into a park where a whole bunch, like 20, 30 different things were set up. And this was everything from bands playing music to models wearing clothes. And it was this big event where 1,100 photographers would show up and they could take pictures of anything at this event. And then they would all enter their best photos into a competition for the best photo. And I took third place out of 1,100 photographers. And I'm trying to find that photo because a lot of that photo was edited in some ways that we were talking about, but I'm not going to find it in time. Also, going back to like the question of like what is art versus, like, I was thinking about this image that I used as the wallpaper, the Disenthrall cube, right? It's a cube. It's a marble cube. But what I did here is I like algorithmically chopped it up into a bunch of pieces. And then I algorithmically selected a random sampling of those pieces to remove. and then I used an algorithm to generate a grid for the blue like hologram, and then I used a random noise sample called a Voronoi texture to like chop out parts of the blue. So like so much of this is algorithmic and computer generated. It was almost like I assembled it using algorithms. But if we look at it from like the artistic intent, then yeah, certainly I think I created art here or whatever. But I also like didn't actually do a lot of the construction work. I don't know. Anyway. All right, cool.
I just looked at the time, and I probably will need to go soon because I got to help the kids get to bed.
Fair enough.
So I lost track of time. I was so interested in what we were talking about. But I'm always interested in hearing what people's near university experiences are, because mine, both as a faculty member and as a student, I realize are now quite long ago. I was like, it was pretty like communist woke 20 years ago. It's got to be worse now. It's got to be like, it's got to just have kept going worse in that direction.
Well, you can certainly drop off if you need to. So
I kind of want to listen for a little bit.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Christian, how was it?
We'll call this a post show. We'll keep it kind of short. I want to make three things extremely clear. One, I regret none of it. Two, I think it was an excellent learning experience and something that I would probably just overall be a worse philosopher without. And three, sorry, did I network errors?
You broke up. Yeah. Start over with three.
Three. I'm glad I went to school in Texas, because I think that had a lot to do with the kind of education that I got. Believe it or not, I think that the Texas culture had a big impact on that. Were there commies everywhere? Were there every flavor of weird person you could possibly imagine everywhere? Yes. I can legitimately say I had never seen a trans person in real life before I started going to university. They were like myths. It was like a unicorn or something. Like, yeah, okay, people on Twitter are talking about them, but they're like not real, right? And then no, they're like everywhere. Whatever your thoughts on that are, whatever your thoughts on that environment are, specifically my education was much less of what I think people expect college to be, which is being constantly embroiled in battle with commie, sycophantic professors, and much more being embroiled in commie, sycophantic battles with my fellow classmates. My professors did a really good job of playing like devils. I'm sure they had their leanings, and many of them were very often willing to express them, and many of them were left-leaning. But man, were they really good at like causing people to stop and question whatever they were thinking. Obviously, I got to have really good interactions with them because I usually did just disagree with what they believed in, but they never let anybody get up and grandstand in front of the classroom, especially as courses got more and more advanced and as the subject matter got more nuanced. Nobody was going to get up and just say, make some declarative about how something is ethically wrong without at least trying to justify it, which I thought was nice, interesting, not at all what college has been sold for a lot of people. And I could be lucky. I could be a person who went to a really good university that had very good faculty with like a learning first, teaching first kind of mentality. But or maybe I'm just hyper resistant to these kinds of things because I'm already, maybe I can see the forest between all the trees or whatever. But I didn't come out of college thinking I was like a failed recipient of an indoctrination program as much as I did just being in an environment where I was exposed to a lot of people who disagreed with me, but were really interested in me getting to explore what I wanted to push and what I wanted to further in like my own personal research. And that was really nice. And I met a lot of people who I would today consider mentors for probably the next couple of years who helped me along on that journey and taught me so much. And I love it.
Important distinction, though, I think, and maybe an explanator for some of the things that you said were different about your experience from what most people think college is. You were older when you started college because you were in the military, right? So you didn't.
True.
You weren't 18 years old when you started, right?
I went through 2 indoctrination programs.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I
So
was in the military.
was it the military that maybe hardened you, or just being older that left you more resistant?
It could have been, maybe, but that kind of, to me at least, like calls into question like the intrinsic nature. Like, is college really just a giant indoctrination breeding ground if like I can still get value out of it without falling into the indoctrination? I don't know. And that's not to say that like I can find a couple of examples throughout my time where I like ran into faculty who didn't know what Hume's law was. And it's like, how are you teaching this class? What makes you the slightest bit qualified to be doing this kind of thing? You know, and for anybody who's watched Disenthrall, you know how much we talk about Hume's law and how important it is. I can go through examples like that, but like as a blanket overall 2.5-year experience, it was really pleasant and I learned a lot and I appreciate a lot of it.
You majored in philosophy, right?
I did.
Okay.
I was originally in computer science and I was like, wow, I don't like this. I'm going to go do something that won't make me any money, but I love. So I did, and I don't regret it.
I chose both. I like. What did you go? What were you? You said you studied philosophy in college, David?
Yeah, I took philosophy classes. I took a bunch of philosophy classes and anthropology classes. Those were like the 2, I guess, other areas that I was really interested in, as well as humanities. Now, I was kind of lucky in that our humanities department in Fresno was full of a bunch of conservatives who later would end up on like Fox News and stuff like that. So that was Victor Davis Hanson and Bruce Thornton and guys like that. And they were like this weird like oak in the middle of a stream of like the philosophy and humanities departments around them being I don't know, just completely different mindset, and they were like hated by the faculty. They were hated. And Bruce Thornton's son, who was a friend of mine, was like, everyone on the faculty hates him because he's an author, he's published all these books, and he's really successful and people really like him. He goes, that's the only reason. It's like he's, you know, he doesn't even disagree with them on most things. It's just, it was purely like he achieved success outside the academic world, and therefore people just, he was like a pariah or something. So I did have those influences, which I don't know, gave me, I don't want to call it like it centered me. It let me realize that, you know, there's people who don't, I'm not the only person here that happens to think the way I think. Now, I was a music major, which meant I was surrounded by people who, for whatever reason, were very leftist in their thought. But even then, my core group of friends, the composition department, our composition teacher was a very liberal guy, but like a boomer liberal, you know. We were super conservative. Like we were very, all of us were Christians. Those of us who weren't were just happened to be more right wing or might be maybe libertarians. I'd actually say we were all pretty much libertarians. And so we had this mindset where we were able to go away from class and talk to each other about these things. But, you know, she said this thing about art, and this is really stupid. What a stupid thing to say, you know? So I had this core group of friends just in this one little corner of the music department that we all happened to think alike. We're not alike. We thought plenty of different things from each other, but it was like, oh, you're not like, you don't think that we should have a communist revolution? Let's go have lunch. Let's go get a beer, man.
I'm kind of the same
way. I had almost the inverse experience. I had much easier time building connections with and having discussions with faculty as a student than I was any of my classmates. Like, man, these people were sipping on the Kool-Aid. I can't really say I made any friends in my time taking these classes because I took a 19th century philosophy course, specifically German philosophy, and we got to Karl Marx, and man, these people were simping for your funny commie beard man and his misanthropic patron. And it was like, it was very strange, especially because my professor was not like that at all. In fact, like, I think he just like, because so many of the class were just like, oh yes, Karl Marx is correct in everything that he says and we love him and blah, 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 blah. He was like very willing to push back on his work. And again, this is not across all departments either. I had a technical writing course. Oh no, sorry, this wasn't technical writing. This was some writing course that I had to do for a degree requirement get co-opted into a critical race theory class that was just not at all about writing. It was literally, I have the book over there. It's literally just a book somebody wrote on why critical race theory is good. And
I had one philosophy class like that. It was a philosophy of religion. It showed up and they're like, we're going to do it on Azani witchcraft and like this other thing. I'm like, what?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. That was like the worst experience I had with the whole, like, that guy was, whew, man, I don't even remember the professor's name. I could look it up if somebody cared. Don't take him though. That guy is lost 12 things. Free A though. I got like a 95 in the class, but, just lost to all reason and rationality. But I saw that a lot more. It was like the philosophy department was very good about like applying their brains to things. Even if I disagreed with them, I think most of them are very smart people with like, even if I think bad, justifications and reasons for why believing what they believe. And I respect that much more than I do the standard drivel that we see day to day, where it's just people on Twitter screeching. Like, these people have put some time and thought into their ideas, where you go over to like the English department and it's like, what will get me the most nice points? You see lots of nice points in areas like that.
Yeah, my experiences with English were like much worse than philosophy, I think. I might have had some similar philosophy experiences. Most of my philosophy teachers were really concerned with the survey of the theories and thinkers, and not so much with like, you need to think this way. It was like, well, this is his arguments and this is his system, and now can you tell me about that and prove to me that you know it?
Okay, so outside perspective time. So, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So I'm looking from the outside in exclusively. I didn't finish high school. I got my GED. I'm almost entirely, I guess, an autodidact. I taught myself everything I know about technology. I got a jump start on my career way early because I didn't even wait to finish high school to get my first coding job. So by the time people were graduating with their masters in, in computers, I had 6 years of experience on my resume. And so I was able to outcompete a lot of the people coming out with degrees. Not only outcompete, but I was able to outperform because I had been actually doing the things rather than just learning about only in part the things that you need to know to be a good computer scientist, right? Because 80% of what you know has nothing to do in college with what you're going to end up doing in your career, right? I mean, definitely correct me if I'm wrong because I'm on the outside here. So I had 6 years of actual applied industry experience, and anyway, I got a jump start. And so my whole career, from the time when I started working as a programmer until I was hiring people and leading large teams of people, and doing the interview process and doing the hiring, is I see a distinct difference between the self-taught and the college-taught. And it taught me, inversely, to really be more cautious about hiring people that are coming out of college with a degree saying that they're good at programming, rather than people that have experience being good programmers. It made me very skeptical from the beginning of formal education in that way. And then from the outside looking in, I also suspect that a lot of the actual hardcore indoctrination when it comes to this, this postmodernistic, Marxism, really happens between grade school and high school. And it's almost like what you're seeing in college is just kind of the output. That's the effect of what already happened, what already took place in grade school to high school. It seems like that's really where the kids are taught, or trained is a better way of saying it, to value the collective over the individual, to value following authority over, self-actualization. And then all you see in college is just kind of the output of that. And of course, like the faculty, and I bet the faculty is more and again, outside guessing, I think the faculty at colleges seem to be more polluted when it comes to like the HR side, when it comes to like the leadership of the college, rather than the on the ground, boots on the ground professors that just have to teach what they need to teach to, do their jobs. It seems like it's more like the structure of the colleges are what's actually kind of rotting before the actual professors doing the teaching. Those are my thoughts. Does that sound like it applies to anything that you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree really with like, I don't think I would disagree with any of that. I definitely like, most of the professors, some of the professors who I liked the most, if we had on this show to like grill about some ethical issue, we would, be doing the same loop we do with 90% of other leftists. So I'm not trying to like make a special exemption for them as far as like their ideas. They just weren't propagandistic. They were people who like actually believed in the ideas. They weren't just like touting rhetoric. Like they'd written the papers, they'd done the research, they'd read the books, they really believed in what they were doing. And like I said, I'll respect that infinitely more than someone who's just like on Twitter, like, oh, this guy said it, so it's true, blah, blah, blah. And I can discuss with those people and have interesting, meaningful conversations with those people. And so, yeah, the indoctrination K through 12 thing very well could be the case. Very well could be the case. It could also be the case that, it just all flew right over my head, or they didn't try it on me. Maybe they thought, I just wouldn't be perceptive to the tactics of the brainwashing machine, so they didn't turn it on. They didn't point the ray gun at me or whatever. Could be the case, but to the one that I think is the most pertinent to most people, it's like, why go to college? Just get the job, get the experience. It's like, yeah, if you want to do some like technical job, like if you want to work in computers, or you want to go like, I don't know, work on cars, or you want to start a business doing something, you should probably go do that. Unless you like really seriously need some kind of training that you can only get by being around other experts, which like the only thing I can think of is like being a lawyer and doing some of these other like paper intensive jobs. 90% of what I did was being assigned books that I never would have read otherwise, most of which I now am happy that I would have read, and being taught how to write a formal paper, write an academic paper. And that is a skill that has turned into something that I really like to do. People, like when I was doing my last round of papers, yeah, it was exhausting. Yeah, it was driving me crazy. I was like, oh my God, I have so much to do. I have so much research to do. But like, I only stressed me out so much because I wanted each and every one of them to be the best paper I've ever written in my entire life. And I think it's fun to do that. I think it's fun to get to like, to do all of this research and get to take the machinations of my mind and throw them onto a page. And I needed people to hit me with the "you're bad at writing" stick until I started doing it good. Like there's no way I could have just sat in a cave and like become a good analytic writer. It never would have happened. I needed guidance for something like that. And maybe that's just me. Maybe some people can totally independently on their own become like a good analytic writer. But I needed that kind of direction. And that's just one example of those kinds of skills that I wouldn't have been able to develop otherwise.
David was a school teacher, right? Do you have any thoughts on anything I said, especially about the indoctrination years?
Yeah, there's a lot of filtering that happens, like as far as who ends up where doing what. So we'll take it from like the elementary school up to high school stuff. When I was getting a teaching credential, I had to take courses on like diversity and something else. And basically, there was a course on white people bad. That's the way I would sum it up. So you were required to write essays on how this is about how schools were racist. I'm like, schools are so racist. Why do we have them? And why would anyone want to be a teacher in such a racist, awful system? And I got to dig into the research, and it's so stupid. Some of the things that are cited. There was like one very important paper that was, some college professor, he didn't even observe it. He sent his grad students to observe a kindergarten class twice and a first grade class twice without the same students in it. And from that, they wrote a serious paper published in a journal that said that schools were racist and that even teachers of color would treat their colored children, their terms, in a racist manner. And so that was when I went and looked at it, and I'm like, this is not anywhere approaching an appropriate survey to make any kind of conclusion on. But yet there's an entire, it's cited as the base knowledge for an entire school of thought. So you filter teachers through that. You make them, it's kind of like what they would do in like, communist societies. They make you write papers even if you don't believe them. write enough papers that they don't believe, and then you start to perpetuate the belief forward. They would do this to POWs. They'd make them like, hey, you get an extra portion of rice. Whoever writes the best essay on communism gets an extra portion of rice. And then they would end up believing it. Like, it's a weird training method. So you have that. So teachers that are really good tend to leave the profession fairly quickly. And I'm actually one of those. I taught at the college level and I taught public schools. And I left public schools after not that long, 3 or 4 years. Part of it was that I had an opportunity to be a stay-at-home dad, and that's such a better calling than being a school teacher. And by the way, if anybody's watching that's a parent or thinking of being a parent, that's one of the ways that you affect the world is by raising children in a good manner, to have good morals and to have good ways of thinking and good behaviors. And it's a positive that you can do in the world that's really, really fulfilling. It's just great. It's great to be a dad. Anyway,
I say all the time on this channel that parenting is the most powerful form of activism. If you want to change the world, raise your kids better.
Yeah. So anyway, you filter out a lot of teachers that are good, and you filter out a lot of teachers that think outside of that box, or just think in a non, think outside the box of the system. And the system is almost like its own organism, its own superorganism that kind of lumbers forward of its own momentum, where anybody trying to change the direction of that or make people think differently is immediately discarded, destroyed, or discredited, or shot down. I remember I had administrators that wanted to switch to this grading standard. They called it was a standards-based grading standard, where you assess the kids on every standard that the state has put out, and if they pass all the standards, then they pass the class. And so basically every kid that passed the class would have an A or a B based on fulfilling all the standards or most of the standards. And then they could retake the assessment until they got each standard and they passed through it. Teachers hated this. They hated it because they wouldn't be able to fail kids for not turning in homework. That's what we get in the public.
Look at this image. I just typed in teacher to get some images, and it's these are actually like this is representational of many things. I know that's supposed to say respectful or whatever.
Repespial.
Look at the hand. Look at the hand.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, that's great. So yeah, you get a lot of filtering, so that you end up with a lot of teachers who have a particular ideological bent, and then they will tell that to their kids, and then that comes down from above. The state tells you what textbooks you have to adopt. The textbooks have a perspective that's written into them, and then so the kid is basically inundated from all authority figures with ways of thinking. Then you have social reinforcement. Basically, the reason I think I came out not being a liberal is that I went to a school in an area where most of the parents weren't liberal. They were conservatives. So most of the kids talking to each other did not reinforce those ideas as much. And then we went off to college, and the kids from the next high school over were like aliens to us. We're like, you actually think this? It's like encountering a foreign culture, but they were just a couple miles away from us. Very weird. So yeah, I think that the secondary school plays a big part in it, but I think we shouldn't underrate how the social peers reinforce beliefs to each other really strongly. And if you're the lone guy who has a weird belief, you're going to have a really hard time. You're going to shut up, or you're going to start articulating the belief that you don't believe until you don't know what you really believe anymore. So I think we overrate maybe the authority, and we underrate the social aspect, the kids that tend to enforce their beliefs on each other through all those little social interactions that happen every day.
Kids rub off on each other really quickly, and it's almost like your kids are being parented by the other kids' parents when they hang out.
Yeah, I have a thing about Gen Y, right? It's like we were raised by each other. Like our parents put us in daycare. We were latchkey kids. We were raised by each other more than we were raised by any adults. Like we weren't really raised by the teacher. The teacher, we only got in trouble with the teacher. It was our peers raised us. We raised each other. And I think that's given us a lot of problems that we've had to grow out of over time. I've certainly had to do a lot of growing since I got out of school to become an adult competent enough to raise my own kids. I would not have been ready when I was 24. So even though I would love to have had more kids, there's no way I would have been mentally capable of dealing with children until I had grown out of some of the bad things that I grew up with.
Christian, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I was just the biggest moment for me. I was always like pretty skeptical of, like, when will I get the dreaded, oh, this is it. This is the college indoctrination. It's hit me now. You have to do this exit interview to be accredited through a particular accreditation agency. You have to do an exit interview for philosophy, and you have to do like a portfolio and everything. And you rank order your papers based off how you think, they exemplify your writing abilities. And I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I spent a lot of time and I wrote a very big, long, well-researched essay on the ontology of racism. What is racism? Because I think just about everybody had the question pretty much wrong. And the number one thing I got was, that was a really well done, interesting paper. And about half of the paper, I just spend talking about why the prevailing politically correct, socially acceptable opinion about what racism is and how it should be addressed is just wrong and doesn't represent what's happening in reality. It was met with like near universal praise. And so I was like, where is the like social pressure coming in to like tell me I'm doing wrong thing? I don't know. I just didn't get any of that. So again, maybe I just got lucky. Who knows? But
all right.
I had a great experience. So
well, that's a good place to wrap up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I probably need to get going here.
All right, sounds good.
This has been so interesting. Like, I don't want to say goodbye, but it's been great.
We can do it again. The internet makes it cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're talking to each other magically and to a bunch of people in chat. Like, this is a really amazing thing.
It is.
Realize, like, historically,
the video
this
AI
is completely unprecedented.
I
replaced the video AIs.
No, so I trained a model on my voice. So I have an AI text-to-speech generator now that sounds like me.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, cool. David, thanks for coming on. I think I would like to have a conversation with you about pornography. You have some interesting opinions on that I'm not hearing from a lot of places. So maybe sometime we could do that.
I think that would be a pretty interesting conversation, and that could go in so many different crazy directions. But anyway.
All right, awesome. Everybody go check out David's channel. Christian, thanks for joining me. I always enjoy having you on to talk about whatever. We have a lot of work to do on anti-subjectivism. We do. We need to get to now that you've moved. Where you moved to Houston? Where are you in Texas? We're all in Texas. Texas is the place to be. David, where are you in Texas?
I'm just north of Houston.
Oh, so Christian just moved near you then. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I'm in Dallas.
I'm in Spring. Yeah, I got a lot of family still in Dallas, and I got a lot of family in the Houston area, so it's great.
We must hang out sometime.
Looking forward to the big cold snap.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
This week.
Yep. All right, guys.
I'm not looking forward to it.
Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your questions and comments in chat. It was really good. I
appreciate it.
I will catch all you guys later. Take it easy.
All right.
Whew. Man.